Okay, guys, Life Unraveled, episode number 40 here with Billy Reeder.
Hey.
I wanted to have you on for a long time, man.
I know, we've been talking about this forever.
Well,
Just finally got around to doing it.
Well, you did. You went on a sabbatical. So,
I did.
Which, we can talk about that at any point in time, but I'm real interested because I sent you a few messages while you were, down south, further than we are presently. But
yeah, I just started referring to it as somewhere south.
Yeah. Well, first off, you're a pirate.
Aye.
So that's all. That's actually, I was like, this guy sails. He's on my friends list. He's a professor. He's a pirate. All of these things, but he doesn't rob people. He's
I'm good kind. I'm really more kind of the Jimmy Buffett level of pirate. It's
take the locals out on your boat.
Just take the locals and convince them to buy you. Bring whatever beverages you can get.
You do a lot of fishing in the Gulf?
I really don't. I'm a terrible fisher. That's actually one of the things I've been trying to learn. So I am a firm believer in being the dumbest guy in the room, right?
You got to put yourselves in a lot of rooms, I find.
And it's one of those because your brain just starts working differently when you're like the dumb guy. Like when you don't know it, you don't know what you don't know. And moving down, so for those who are listening, I split half my time between here in Arkansas and then the other half down in South Texas and Corpus Christi and all the way down to the Mexican border. But that coastal living, like saltwater, like you think you understand habitat here. Like I can wander out in the Ozarks, the Ouachitas all day long. I can tell you pretty much anything you want to know. I can hunt, I can fish. I go down there. I don't even know what fish I'm supposed to be fishing for. Like, I don't know what they do. Like, I'll see a fish. There's this, it's got a zebra stripe. It's like this white and black fish. And it's always like chewing on the side of the boats and the docks. You're like, it's chewing on the barnacles. I know what this thing was. It's cool looking. It's called like a sheep's head fish. And it's just sheep's head. I didn't know what it was. Thing's got like, if you look at a picture, it looks like it has human teeth.
Oh, man. I think I've seen like a meme about this fish. Yeah.
And it was just like, and then you start catching other fish. They have like barracuda style teeth. And this is when you realize like, you're down saltwater. I'm just not going to reach my hand and my fingers and just don't put them in their mouths.
That's
and you don't, it's just learning all that. And so I just started hanging out with people like, teach me stuff.
Do you fish a lot around here?
Not,
routinely growing up?
Nah, not really. I grew up on a farm, and we didn't really like fishing. Was just something other people got to do because we had stuff that we had work to do. We had cows to chase and do that kind of stuff. I used to take my canoe, put it on a creek or something, and just go like perch jerking. Like I didn't care what I caught. Like I never got people who really know how to fish. They're always like talking lures and what they're doing at what depths the fish is doing, and and they're hitting this right now because they're doing that. And I'm like,
what color jig to use?
I know, right?
I mean, I hit some a few seasons where like we would catch the white bass running.
Right.
You ever hear about that?
Mm-hmm.
They'll run a certain time of year, start spawning a certain time of year, and you can just pull one out of the water about every cast.
Right.
I went trout fishing a lot. Like you were talking about fly fishing earlier when I was growing up, but I never figured it out. Mm-hmm. Like there'd be people literally pulling them out from under me.
Right.
And I'm just like, and they'd be like, say things like, you've got to present it. Right. And I'm like, what does that mean?
I don't know what this fish wants from me. Like, just, no, you're reeling too fast. No, you're reeling too slow. No, you need to be a different depth. No, that's the wrong color. Nope, hook's wrong.
Hit the water wrong.
Or what kind of leader you use? I'm like, I just want to throw it. Just, old school, put a worm on a hook and a bobber and throw that thing out there. And if something bites it, great.
The happiest times of my fishing life were when the bobber went under me,
like, I was like, holy moly, there it goes. Something happened. So, yeah, I don't. It's for me, it's just I'll fish off the boat. I hardly ever catch anything. But I don't care. There's a sort of a therapeutic thing about just casting a line and reeling it back in over and over while you're actually thinking about something else.
You ever catch any, like, you be out on the boat, catch any fish, eat it for dinner type situation?
Yeah, like when we brought the boat down, like so when I originally bought it, so I've got a 37-foot sailboat. I bought it outside of Houston in a city called Kemah, which is it's in Galveston Bay. And then I sailed it down the coast to Corpus Christi. So we were trolling, the whole time, and we'd catch like kingfish or whatever, and
Yeah.
you could catch. We didn't catch any mahi, but a lot of people will do that.
And I ate mahi the whole time I was in Pensacola last
And
week.
that's kind of the cool thing about sailing. It's that kind of boat because you're fully contained within the boat. So we're making fish tacos while we're sailing.
Who does not love fish tacos?
It's a tough life.
Yeah. Oh man. So I mean, other than so you were working at what was how does sabbatical work?
Okay. Let me give you a little background on this. Kind of why I took the sabbatical. So summer 18, Memorial weekends when I took the boat down to Corpus. And the reason we'd been going to Corpus for years. My wife's brother lives down there and his family.
Oh, that's nice.
And so that was kind of our getaway vacation place because we could have a place to stay. It was free and we could just, go and hang out. And so I got down there Memorial weekend, and it was just literally right about that time that the Trump's zero policy went into effect on immigrants. And so they flipped the switch, making an illegal border crossing from a civil offense to a criminal offense. It's still rated about the same as a speeding ticket as far as we're talking about levels of offense. But what happened when that civil to criminal thing is it was 100% prosecution. So it meant all the parents, adults had to go to jail, basically. They had to take which you can't put kids in jail, like in an adult jail. And so that's what forced the family separation issue. And so all this stuff started happening like the week after I got down there. And so I had all my camera gear, and I just took off. I just went down to the border and started kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And so I worked on that during the summer, and then I got back, and I was just like, this story just keeps going. And so I started thinking, I was like, man, I wish I could just spend a lot of time down here. And I was eligible for a sabbatical. I've been there long enough. This is my 14th year at Tech teaching.
Never taken one?
Never taken a sabbatical. And so it's basically, for us, you've got to put in a certain number of time before you're even eligible to do it. And then after that, fill out a proposal, and then you turn it in. There's a board, sabbatical board, and so they either approve it or don't approve it. So
do you have to get a grant or anything to go along with the project?
The university actually has some funds to help cover some of your because a lot of people do it for research purposes. They want to take a sabbatical so they can do some sort of research, and then the university does have some level of funding that can help pay for some of that. I already had a pretty good infrastructure going on by that time. I had some good contacts. I already had a place to stay, and so it was actually pretty easy for me. And so I didn't ask for any money to go with it. Plus,
do you get your normal salary?
Yeah, you still collect your.
That's huge.
So the way it works here, you can take one semester sabbatical, which is what I did, and get your full salary during that time, or you can take a full year and draw half your salary. Yeah. So
I mean, if you balance that with a grant, or you have some university funds or whatever, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and if you've got some, if you can swing it, then more power to you. I was I just want to do the one semester. Plus, I think it's a little easier to get approved if you just do one semester. And so that's what I did. I said, look, I want to investigate the border. I've already down there. I've already been working on it. I want to just keep running with it. And write some stories.
Was the board just super receptive and supportive of that?
You don't really even know. You kind of had to go back and forth a couple of times with a few nitpicky things. Kind of they want
hoops.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of typical bureaucratic type
There's
stuff.
There's a form to fill out for this.
There's always 3 forms, and did your TPS reports and whatever that.
That's why I was talking to Hausnick when you came in the coffee house. I was like, hey, I'm meeting Reader at 11.
Yeah.
Come in at 10:30 because some student hit me up and was like, will you run the Model U in? And I was like, luckily for you, this guy from Tech, I know him real well. He comes on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I will. Because I thought about it initially. I was like, man, I'm going to have to fill out forms for this.
Right.
And I was like, I'm not immediately, that's what I said. They asked me about it. I was like, no, you need to ask a political scientist.
I'm not a forms kind of guy. That's just not my thing.
And then I was like, no, that'd be good. If I'm going to have to do stuff, because the involvement is expected, and I like that. And it's like, if I'm going to have to choose, it's like, after I thought about it, I was like, no, wait, I'm interested.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to try and kind of make that my niche thing, and maybe they'll be proud of me.
Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. Fill out the proposal. Kind of tell them what you want to do, how you're going to do it. You know, if you're going to publish something, how you expect to get published. Going through all that sort of stuff. And plus, there's kind of an expectation, you know, that you're going to have something to show for your work when you get back, right? As opposed to just disappearing for 6 months or whatever, and then coming back and there is nothing.
Did you do like you did a blog?
Yeah,
right.
So I created a website.
What is where can we access that?
BillyReeder.com.
That's super simple.
BILLYREEDER.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, it's yeah. I mean, there's being a freelance journalist working on the border. There's some jumps, you know, some. Well, there's just some hurdles you got to get over, especially if you don't have, you know, the backing of like some major, well-branded media outlet. You know, you'd probably be hard to believe this, but saying you're from Arkansas Tech when you're, you know, dealing with the Border Patrol really doesn't get you very far.
Well, I mean, what would you have to be like Ivy League? I'm from Harvard.
I know. They don't even necessarily care about it. Wouldn't really matter what school. It's like, hey, I'm from the Washington Post. Hi, I'm from NBC. Hi, I'm from CNN.
Major outlets.
Yeah, they're looking for. Yeah, I had one of the most ridiculous conversations with a PR lady from the Border Patrol because I was trying to get a ride along. Because my whole deal was, you've got people in Washington, you've got pundits on TV. They're always talking about the border, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the people you never really seem to hear about are people like they're actually there, like the frontline people, the people like if you're talking like in war metaphors, you always hear from the general, but you never actually hear from the private on the front line,
on the ground. Yeah.
And so I wanted to go talk to the people let's find out what's really going on. Let's get away from the politics of it. Let's quit trying to make, you know, villains, and let's just talk to people. And so I was trying to get a job or get a ride along and interview some like Border Patrol guys down there. You know, there's a million Border Patrol guys down there. It's, you know.
Did you meet any at any point during this process?
Oh, yeah. You tend to just meet people because it's one of those. It's like living in Russellville. You're going to find. Eventually, you're going to meet somebody who teaches at Tech.
People work as Border Patrol.
They really do. I mean, there's a ton of them.
Like an industry, right?
Okay. Yeah, it is.
For lack of a better word,
the whole border is an industry, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, I have some real specific. Is just keep going, but like with the kids thing, and like what would lead us to even make laws that way, and some things that I've heard, and man, I was just asking you questions several times while you were down there.
Yeah.
I mean, you got me paying attention more so than anybody, and then just like I was seeing things you would share and post about, and that got me paying attention every time and digging, trying to find my own facts, but. Border Patrol. You were.
I was trying to do a ride along because I wanted to interview. You know, like legitimate interview. I was a cop for 5 years, so I kind of have.
That blew my mind when I heard you were a cop.
I know, because people are like, "You don't look like a cop." Okay.
McMillan's who told me that.
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" Apparently, y'all were in the same role.
Yeah, we both were the PIOs for RPD.
That's great.
So yeah,
you got your PhD while you were doing that?
Well, I actually don't have my PhD. I got my master's. I've got
no way.
Yeah. So in the journalism department. It's one of those things where they want people to actually know, like, have been on the field and actually worked. And so, in that world, they can substitute experience for the degree. And so, I had my master's degree, and then I'd been working in the field for several years. And then it was one of those. I started teaching accidentally. They needed an adjunct for one class. And then I got the call, hey, can you come teach this one class? This is a technical class because, you know, that's kind of my background is more the technical side of a lot of this. And, yeah, I can teach that. And then one class turned into 3. And then next year it was, hey, can you be a visiting professor? And that was the year that the economy bombed.
2009. Yeah, that's year I went.
And I was doing a lot of freelancing back then. And I was like, you know, I could use some job security right now. And then visiting turned into a tenure track, and tenure track turned into tenured, and here I am.
Wow, you have tenure with a master's.
I know,
didn't even know that was possible.
Oh yeah, it's totally possible. It's a different pathway, but yeah, it's there.
Nice.
But let me circle back around finally because I keep running away from this Border Patrol story.
Sorry.
I think I'm taking this as far away as you are.
Well, I was going to ask you about like with the cop thing and everything, but we got it out of the way.
Oh yeah. Anyway, so we got. I was talking to this PR lady in D.C. who worked for Border Patrol. It took forever just to get a call with her because if you remember, there was a point in time that the government shut down.
Yeah.
Which so you had Border Patrol agents working without pay for a while.
Oh man, yeah.
That made them happy.
And it fired the Forestry Commission and stuff. All sorts of people.
Everything
a
got
lot of people
really
at the
messy.
gym.
Well, all the essential staff, didn't go to work, and so PR lady in D.C. was followed under that category. So it took a while to even talk to her, and I was like, "Here's my project. This is what I'm doing. I'm a journalist. I'm working on this thing, and I want to talk to somebody." And she's like, "Who are you with?" So I told her I'm a professor and I'm freelancing right now. Da, 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 da. Oh, well, these guys are really busy. And so, we get a lot of media requests all the time. Da, 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 da. And it's like, okay. And again, I was like, this isn't a hit piece. I'm not trying to make a villain out of anybody. I just want to talk. And literally within 5 minutes, she's like, well, we could probably make some time to talk to somebody, but that's as long as you don't bring a camera and you don't take any notes. And I had this, and the look you just gave me is the exact sort of look I gave to my phone. I'm like, so they don't have time to talk to me as long as I'm going to take notes. But they do have time to talk to me as long as I don't. And this is where things started getting really weird for me on that. And I've worked and done some PR work, and I thought, you guys are just doing it. This is the worst possible thing you could do right now. Because you're letting everyone on the other side of the story, set the narrative. You guys are just shutting down and won't talk to anybody. And so,
why do you think that is?
I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of puzzling. I mean, have you thought about it a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I have, and it's never good. It's because the truth only hurts when it's supposed to. And and when you're doing something and it's not right, you're going to try to shy away from that. And and I don't really even know what good it would have done because I still would have written about it. I could have agreed to all that and just gone along, and then it just never, it was one of those that turned into just chasing a tail that just never would, present itself. But I just remember thinking, okay, I can walk down there, and it was next to impossible to talk to anybody who was an asylum seeker once they got to the U.S. too, because once they crossed the border, they were locked into some sort of facility, and you couldn't talk to them. And so my pathway into that was actually dealing with humanitarian workers who were there.
I think I saw you do a live or something.
Probably.
When you were... was that you I saw down in this one area where they were holding people behind a chain link fence?
No, I probably posted pictures of that though, but that was more out in toward El Paso on the western side of the country, or the state of Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Texas sometimes feels like its own country.
I remember you posting about kind of making some inroads.
Yeah, and it was, so I started making inroads. I found it's one of these friends of friends of friends. You just start making, my whole deal was just making connections. All the other journalists going down there would just walk in, get the same story that the last guy or girl did right before them, to come in, this is terrible, this is whatever, and then pack up their stuff and leave. And they weren't really getting to kind of the core of a lot of what was going on, the deeper story there. And so I just said, look, I'm not coming in. Sometimes I would just show up. I'm like, I'm not even going to take notes today, per se. I just want to hang out with you guys.
I heard not to take notes.
I'm just look, I'm just coming in, because everybody distrusts everybody. And I'm just I just want to hang out with you for a while. And from my perspective is I need to gain your trust. And so if that takes me just being down here for a while and just sort of helping you, I would volunteer at some of these places and just do stuff just so they'd get to know me. And then once that happened, then they would, then you could get them to start opening up.
Immersion.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's, I embedded myself basically, just look, I'm just here. Get to know me. I'll tell you what I think. I'm not, I'm not coming in any. I will tell you my agenda if I have one, but I just need you to get to know, who I am. So,
yeah. Well, what sort of stuff did you run into? What progression was it after you just stayed embedded in what you were doing, and your inroads didn't go further, or
no? It was one of those. Okay, the first time I went down there, I had one friend who lived in Brownsville, and Brownsville's kind of ground zero for a lot of this. It's the easternmost city in the U.S. Texas border, and it's one of the main. It's what we call the Rio Grande Valley. They just call it the valley down there. It extends Brownsville. The Mexican side of it is Matamoros, and then you go up to like Laredo, and that would be, if you follow the border, that's what they call the Rio Grande Valley. I had a Facebook friend from Brownsville I'd never met personally, and I just got a hold of her and just like, hey, she was a pastor down there, and I was like, hey, this is what I want to come to do. You know, I don't know anybody. You mind taking me around? And so we ended up going down there. I met her, and I think I did a 2 or 3 times just with her. And you know, again, I didn't really know her, so I had to gain her trust at first too to make sure, you know, she was okay with me. And then we went into Mexico for the first time, and just sort of, it was like, that was my big question. I was like, I keep hearing on the news about how awful this place is.
Had you been to Mexico before?
Yeah, I mean, more like a tourist though. Not
me too.
like,
I went once when I was a kid, but
like, you know, it had been a while, and I knew there's, you know, we talk about cartel stuff, and you don't really know what's going on.
I've seen Breaking Bad.
Yeah, you know, I've watched Ozark. You know, I know the stuff. Actually, Ozark's there's a lot more truth to Ozark.
I'm so like, I've been conspiracy. You may have. I talk about this all the time. I'm like, you really want to soften the market about casinos? You get Hollywood to put an episode together in that region based off that culture.
Yeah.
Like that's how deep my mind is with the Russellville Casino. But whatever.
I tell you what happened. But I walked. So we crossed in there, and across the border. You know, we talked to the guy on the bridge, one of the security guys. It's like, so what's the danger level there? And he's like, I don't know. And this is when it got weird for me, because he's like, I haven't crossed this bridge in 10 years. I'm like, you work on this bridge, and yeah, I'm not going over there. And that's when you start trying to pick apart who's afraid of who down there. And
why aren't you going over?
Why won't you go over there? And it's for them.
Does it say like a guy with a machine gun?
He wasn't a border patrol guy, but he was he works under that umbrella as bridge security. And but he wouldn't go in. But again, it's a lot of the feedback of I heard, and it's sort of this. There's a paranoia a lot with the cartels. And so we were like, all right, we're going to go in. They don't know me, and I just kind of went in as a tourist. I didn't take my big camera. I just sort of walked in and used my iPhone, and just acted like an idiot professor. I'm in Mexico, and got some tacos. Talked to some locals at first, and then we just started wandering around. And it was weird, like the things you don't expect to see when you go into Mexico. Like the first thing was an Irish pub. And I walked. Yeah, this was in walking distance of the border. I was like,
did you have a Guinness?
I didn't go in. They weren't open yet because it was early in the day. They weren't open yet. And there was a sushi bar across the street. And these are nice.
What?
These are nice places, right? And so we start. And I'm like, what the heck? This isn't. If you'd listen to half the
they knew you were coming, man.
Well, no, it's not even that. But if you listen to like the politicians, and half of what I would say Fox News listeners had this there's these raging hordes of Mexicans or just brown
mud brick buildings,
whatever. Everybody's in umbrellas and machetes and trying to kill you. They're all and they're all smoking, or doing cocaine. No, and then you realize and then we wander around. There's the kind of old downtown. It's very kind of old school Mexico. It's that you feel like you're in Mexico. So we wander around for a little while. We found an old newspaper office that had been abandoned. So we may have explored that place illegally. I don't know, but we ended up getting in there and wandering around, but it had been abandoned for years. And I started walking back, and the levee on the Rio Grande is actually a bike trail. There's markers, there's people riding their bikes, having picnics. And I'm like, this does not
fit the narrative.
This does not fit the narrative. And that's because that was my big deal, is when I first went down there. I was like, I've heard that, the American government is, ripping children away from their parents, and is this true? Yes, it's kind of yes or no. And then I've heard this is what Mexico's like. Is what I'm hearing true? Yes or no? And then you get down there and you realize that the narrative, the actual narrative, is far more nuanced and far more tragic than what people are actually talking about. We're both big long form fans. I started out in broadcast news, and I got out of it because you can't tell a story in 90 seconds. You just can't. Not a good story. You can hit some high points. You can hit some dramatic points. You can do some stuff that's going to get viewers and clicks, but you can't tell the full story. And so I thought, okay, there's all this stuff's going on, and I can't pretend that the cartel stuff isn't going on as well, because it is. But what you find out is just a lot of this is below the surface. And then you find out what our government's doing, and then you find out what their government's doing, and then you find out at some level that it's also a bit of a industry to keep it going the way it is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of and so that's what I've been working on ever since.
Did you listen to the Dan Crenshaw?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. I did too, and I just some things that he brought up, like. I'll just say, like, I do not identify with being either Democrat or Republican, or man, I'm very centrist if you boiled everything down to it. But some of the things, so like I hate like saying that like some of the things he said that like I had thought previously because I don't want to be labeled as a whatever, But he did say some things, and like my thing on the border, and maybe you can shed some light on this, and I'd ask you questions about some of the stuff previously is. One thing that he brought up, I thought about, like, okay, so first off, there's people coming in through Mexico from other South American countries that are wrecked right now, and Mexico's letting them pass through to get to the U.S. border.
Right.
He didn't really hit a ton on that, but he was talking about, like, children being recycled. Like, they walk back over the border like you did, and they come up with other people. Right. I've seen a video of, like... it looked like a female with a wig. They took the mask off.
We always see the same kids coming back through over and over and over again.
Yeah, he mentioned that and some things that I thought about, and then also he talked about like immigration patterns. And the thing I asked you, I remember I was out of town for my birthday, and we were messaging. I was watching Widespread Panic, of course, and I was like, "Man, I just saw a stat that said 100,000 people came to the border in this month alone. Is that true?" And you were like. Yes.
Yes, that's true.
And then we start talking about it in like the court process of you there's not enough people, judges and people on staff to hear that many cases, to deal with that many hearings.
Right.
Why are so many people coming through, and what are the issues with them coming through, and what things are being manipulated to cause either side to make their laws, and why isn't Mexico controlling their southern border? Mm-hmm. Those are all things that he kind of brought up collectively that are things I'd also thought about.
Okay, so lots of stuff. So let's kind of go to the background. So one of the things that's kind of a misnomer is that the only people that show up at the border are Mexicans, right?
I don't even think that many of them are based off what you said too.
At this point in time, hardly any of them are. I mean, there are some, but that's not the majority of what's going on. So what happened, where everything sort of ramped up, when NAFTA first got enacted, one of the things that happened is it just killed the farming economy in Mexico. There was because suddenly Mexican farmers were competing with American farmers who were subsidized and had all these other things working for them, and the Mexican farmers just couldn't compete. One of the other things that they were supposed to do with all that, they thought they were going to build a bunch of factories and stuff on the border, on the Mexican side of the border, and that's where all these jobs were going to come from, right? That didn't necessarily happen. They did do some of that, but then a lot of these other factories went to China. And so a lot of the stuff that people thought was going to go to Mexico actually ended up going to China. So what you ended up was this just about broke the Mexican economy in a lot of different ways. There was just major unemployment. And so this is when you had a big push of like Mexican immigrants trying to get across. It was late 90s, really. It was when after Clinton. And so that was the big drive. Well, things have sort of leveled out a lot more since then, and so it's not as big of a deal for the Mexicans to actually come like they would. Plus, as far as deportation rates, like it's almost guaranteed if you're Mexican and you try to come here, you're going to get deported. For if you're coming for economic reasons, unless you have some sort of visa already approved. Now, why everyone else comes through here is when you're talking about a lot of these immigration laws, you have to set foot on American soil, and you've got to present yourself for whatever reason. If you're talking about asylum, you've actually got to present yourself on American soil. These folks can't actually fly to the United States, because that's one of the questions I always hear. Why don't they just fly here? Well, they can't, because you have to have a visa that says you can fly here before you can ever get on the plane to come here, right? So they can't do that, nor can they fly into Canada, generally. But there are a few South American countries that you can fly into without any kind of pre-approved visa. So what they actually do is they fly to these Central American or South American countries. They can get physically on the same landmass the United States sits on, and then they can make the journey north. And so what happens when they get to the southern border of Mexico is Mexico does do some of that. And, one of the other misnomers is nobody ever stays in Mexico. Actually, a lot of people stay in Mexico. But a lot of them don't, and so they come on up. And so what Mexico usually does is give them a 2-week travel visa. And so they get a 2-week travel visa, which gives them enough time to get across, to get to the American border, which used to be enough, right? So before the Trump administration's change in policy, somebody presented themselves for asylum. They would present themselves at the border. It may take a few days to get in, and you have to get a few hours to get through the process. Whatever had to go, you get vetted. Whatever that process was measured in hours and days, right? So when the Trump administration shut down a lot of this stuff, what happened was they sort of just basically closed the border. Now it takes months.
So these people are just stacking up.
They're just stacking up. So you know what happens if you dam a creek up? You're going to end up with a lake, right? It was a manageable flow until you put a dam up, and then suddenly it just starts building and building and building. And Mexico doesn't have the infrastructure to deal with it on their side of the border, so now you have these people living on the streets.
What would you say the difference is? Because I haven't looked all this up.
Mm-hmm.
Obama had some similar approaches on immigration, and
Right.
But he at least said some of the same. And I am not a Donald Trump fan. As a matter of fact, on the podcast yesterday, I was like, dude, I think we should have 5 presidents for 5 sections of the United States. Like, one person's running all this shit. And the person was like, dude, you just blew my mind. I never thought about that.
Right.
But Obama, I've at least seen clips of him. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they're put out by Trump, just like I was like, remember that one video I messaged you about? I'm like, dude, I think they're trying to make me feel this way. Why is this video here? What do you think about it? But I've seen clips of Obama saying some of the same things about border security and border policies. And is any of this carryover from the Obama administration? And if so, what?
Yes and
no.
what
are their kind of differences?
Obama actually had one of the highest deportation rates of a president. He deported way more people than George W. Bush, which it's actually kind of one of the things I found interesting is folks in Texas are actually way more sympathetic. I mean, you've got some that definitely aren't, but people from Texas generally sort of get it, like why people are, and that's just part of the culture, and it's the way of life there. So they're kind of okay. But Obama did deport a lot of people. Where you get into family separations, he wasn't separating families. What they were doing is actually detaining entire families, but they were detaining them together. And it was typically fairly short-lived. This is when you actually get a few months, but then they would get deported or whatever happened if they were applying for asylum. Once they got vetted, then they would get released together. Where the Trump stuff came in is they were actually separating the kids from their parents.
And why were they doing that?
I mean, I can tell you the sinister reason. The policy reason was because they switched a civil offense of illegal crossing to a criminal offense. So it used to be first offense, you jump the fence or whatever, you crawled under the fence, whatever. It was it's just kind of a light misdemeanor. Hey, go back, slap your hand. They come back, second offense, it ups the ante. With the civil offense, there's no required what I call detainment time. Right? They just kick you right back. And that's more of kind of what Obama was doing. Then they moved to more of kind of a catch and release sort of policy. The sinister side of the Trump's deal of flipping it to a criminal offense, because it's still, even as a criminal offense, you're not talking hard jail. You're talking about something equivalent to a speeding ticket, right? But it forces, with 100% prosecution, it forced those people to be detained.
So if you can't pay the speeding ticket, you got to go to court. There's a court date, and you have to wait.
You got to go to jail. Well, while you're waiting in jail, you can't have your kids there because you can't keep kids in an adult prison. So we take the kids and we put them in their own place. And again, this is an entire industry. And you've had a lot over the past, several years. And another thing to say is in 2018, well, when Trump took office, we were at about a 20-year low for crossings on the southern border. Like, we were at a lull. Like, it kept talking crisis, 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 and it was build the wall, build the wall. This is a big political point for him. But statistically, we're at a really low period of time for those crossings. And but then you get down there, and then you also realize that there's also has been this deal where, like, kids would come over, like, parents would legitimately send their kids across alone. It's kind of one of those. It sounds terrible from, like, an American standpoint. Like,
what would lead somebody to do that? Like, what sort of political, social, economic situation is leading people to make those calls?
And those are the kind of the questions you have to ask. And that's where one of the things I spent time doing is talking to people, like, why would you do something like that? Like, why would you come here? And part of it is just to kind of the idea, this American dream idea, that I thought if I get my kid in the United States, they'll have a chance. Like, if they're a child, they'll get put in the system, but they'll end up with a permanent residency in the United States, and they can have a better job and a better life. Kind of that's the sort of, you think about kids that get put up for adoption because they think, they'll have a better chance without me as their parent. Kind of the same sort of mentality. Or
that makes sense.
Or, they may be sending a kid over there knowing that they've got family in the United States too. So there may be an uncle that lives in Kansas. If I get this kid there and I've got a relative, then that kid's going to end up living with my brother in Kansas. And so, but again, it makes that sort of transfer of the kid has a better chance now, right? But the other thing is, like, there's these detention facilities for kids. I mean, we can call them, we can call them detention centers. And that's kind of what they are. Like the one in Brownsville, it's a renovated Walmart supercenter. Holds hundreds of kids.
I saw that.
Casa Padre. That's the first day I went down there. I was like, because they were, it's when it was all hitting the news that all these kids were there. And I was like, really, like, imagine, it was a full-size supercenter. Completely renovated. Still looks like a Walmart, though. But they wouldn't let hardly anybody. Like, we had, the first day I went down there, sort of accidentally walked into a press conference with a bunch of Democratic Congress members. And it was just like, what's going on down there that can justify this? And now, because that is a multi-billion dollar industry, is just detaining these kids. And you think, and I saw a couple of weeks ago that they're about to open another one somewhere else.
That's the only reason I'm familiar with this narrative is because there's something going around about it.
And the last figure I heard is those places charge like $700 a day to detain somebody like that.
Who pays?
We do.
The taxpayers, Americans?
We pay, because they get a government contract to house these kids, and so this, when I'm talking about, it's an industry. It's an industry, and so when then you start kind of following the money, you're like, what would motivate us to keep this going?
Well, what would motivate us to keep this going?
That becomes the follow the money sort of thing, And I'm not saying that these people that would work in these things are terrible people. Like, I've met people who are caretakers in those facilities. They're just really sweet people that really want to take care of kids. But the reality is they're working in an industry that sort of is monetizing, human tragedy.
What do you know about some of these South American countries that are wrecked because of what people would call regime change wars? And how much of the immigration through Central America is being caused due to problems occurring in South America, which may or may not be created by Western democracy?
Most of what I have, yes, is the quick answer. This is where I talk about it becomes nuanced. So one of the things you realize once you get out of the United States, actually, once you get past what I call first world countries into like...
we were complaining about our internet earlier.
Right, we're complaining about, I don't have fast enough internet out of my
We're trying to move to South Korea.
I have to, when I say things like I have to use satellite internet, like, oh, poor you, right?
You do live in a cabin, though.
I do live in a cabin in the woods.
You work out in the field.
But that's
chasing
still kind of
cows.
It's kind of a first world problem, though, right? So, well, you have these power vacuums, and you can. When we start getting into the world of power vacuums, that's when you start having to ask questions why they are. But you get into a lot of these third world countries, or a friend of mine, the same one I went the first day, she's like, I refer to these as 2 third world countries because 2/3 of the world's like this. The rules are completely different. Like, we have like this very strict, rule of law. Things happen for a reason. Like, you can't just go down in theory and, bribe your local city politician and get whatever you want, and in theory. But you get into a lot of these places, and this is just that's just the way of life. I remember that when I was in Africa, I was like, you want to get through customs a little faster, you just, make sure you're paying off the right people and you get expedited on the way through.
Hey, TSA works that way now.
Yeah.
I'm about to sign up.
Because you get the free, the fast pass, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that's just sort of a way of life in a lot of these countries. Like, they don't think of it as wrong. It's just part of the culture. And so one of the things that's interesting about the Mexican border with the U.S. is like sort of these two kinds of worlds collide. Like, we have the rule of law world, and then you've got the kind of Wild West sort of law. But what's happened within the context of these power vacuums is really where you start getting into, like, this is where the cartels come in to play, because they're really the ones in charge in a lot of these places. Cartels often get, like, you see, like, MS-13. People are like, show some dude with tattoos all over his face, and, that's part of it.
Do they really look like that? I mean, or is it like it's much more subtle?
It's much more subtle. There's probably more accountants and lawyers working for cartels than there are gang members.
That's what that's in the back of my mind, the cultural image of, like, we were talking about the cultural image of martial arts earlier. Uh-huh. It seems like the cultural image, when you say cartel, I have something different in my mind than probably the reality.
Right. And those, like the MS-13 looking dude is kind of, that's a part of it. That's a faction.
Like on the spectrum.
But that's the best way I heard cartels described is a multinational, it's a multinational corporation that specializes in illicit business. That's their thing. But they also have their own private armies.
You mentioned that when we were talking, just correspondence when you were down there.
Yep.
What do you know about that? How does that? Did you have any interactions? See any of this? You said you felt like they probably, knew that you were around.
I was told that they would know that they knew I was there.
I've thought about that many times since you said that, and I was just like, talk about paranoia, man. Like, I'd be losing my mind.
It's one of the, but it's one of those. You don't mess with us, we don't mess with you. I'm not on their radar as long as I'm not causing problems. Most of the violence in the cartel world is cartel against cartel. It's like gang violence here.
Well, what would be causing problems? Would something like this be causing problems?
Nah, this wouldn't, because they don't necessarily hide it. The numbers I've gotten is like they make, just on drugs, just drugs alone is about a $25 billion a year industry going across the border. So you start thinking about that kind of money, $25 billion a year. That's not being dealt with by some little.
And that's coming south to us, is what you're saying.
So what happens? No, that's our money's going there. So because it's American money that's going down, because they're supplying us. So they're supplying us drugs. We're supplying them guns.
Okay, so is this also? Do you know anything about this?
Mm-hmm.
Us being where we are with cannabis. Mm-hmm. I don't know where South America, Central America is with cannabis, but is all of is a lot of our cannabis being grown legally in certain states going south now? And is that a part of what we're talking about?
I think most of the drugs that are coming north. What we send to them are guns.
Who's we?
The United States. So like
they.
Yeah, the U.S. guns, because we love guns here, right? We can, you can go to a gun show. You can go to a gun show and pick up all the AR-15s you want. Doesn't matter who you are.
Can't get them at Dick's or Walmart though.
Not there, but you can go to a gun show, buy yourself a carload of them, take them south, smuggle them across the border, and then handle them to the cartels, and that's how they get armed. And so
I never thought about that.
Yeah, that's the flow. There's a guy, he was on Rogan.
So just some individuals are doing that. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like we could not like we would ever do this, but we could just be like, hey Billy, let's go over this gun show in Conway today and stock up, and out here we can go sell these to these guys down here.
Well,
and
they'll probably now they don't need you to go sell them. They already have their guys.
they already have their
They have
connections.
a network.
So it's not that.
The literature I read said the cartel has a presence in at least 5,000 U.S. cities. Put your head around that.
How north are we talking?
The whole
all the way to Canada,
all the way. You know, and they're multinational. It's not just here. They're also going to Europe.
yeah, I mean, that's...
But so where they get like the gang member look, the MS-13 types, is what will happen. Let me give you a little background. It's really easy to corrupt Mexican police. The stats I read is the average Mexican border patrol or local police officer probably makes about $200 a month in Mexico, right? You've got a $25 billion a year industry that controls the border. And what they do is they try to control what they call plazas, which is the crossings. And so all their violence is usually turf wars over those plazas. Like Laredo is the biggest one because that's like, I think they said 30 to 40% of all goods travel from U.S. to Mexico and back and forth at that crossing. And they like a really busy crossing because the more chaos there is, the more cars, the harder it is to find stuff that's hidden.
Yeah.
Right? And so these cartels are always competing over these things. And so one of the things that would happen is if they're trying to move in, so a cartel's coming in, like one it's on its way out, but it was the predominant one for a long time, was the Gulf Cartel, which is home based in Matamoros, which is where I was. They would go in, and actually let me take it a little bit further back. You had a big turf war between like the Gulf Cartel and then the Zetas. And what the Zetas originally were...
Is there a book about the Zetas?
Yeah, there's a book called Zeta Inc.
Yeah,
it's almost more like a PhD sort of thesis. It's written by a professor down around in Brownsville. The Zetas were actually Mexican special forces that were American. You know, they were trained by American military, like counterterrorism type deal. So they were trained, but they're still on Mexican pay scale, and so they're highly trained soldiers who are getting dick for pay, right? And so then what happens is the cartel just comes in, and so the Gulf Cartel approaches them and says, "Hey, we'll make you, basically we'll make you rich if you'll just be our security." And so that's what happened. And so they just started recruiting these guys who are super trained special forces ops. Well, and that's what happened. And so the Zetas are the ones that they started up in the ante as far as the violence is concerned.
Adjust it however you need.
It's okay.
These are only $34.
I just started realizing I was sinking lower and lower.
Yeah, man. I always have to just put my shoulders back right now. I've been getting over this rib injury. It's been brutal, but I always have to. Right now, I keep leaning to one side. I keep having to. So do whatever you need to make yourself comfortable.
Anyway, so the Zetas were working as security for the Gulf Cartel, and and then over time they started getting a little more prominence within the cartels. And it's at one point they just break away and become their own. And they're the ones who just really super hyped up the violence because we got them battling. Because they can. They know how. Like these are. And again, we can go in the history of the border. It goes back to the Comanche Wars back in the 17 and 1800s. Kind of how it got to be the way it is. But they would use violence as a form of deterrence, right? So if I behead a bunch of people, or hang their bodies off an overpass, I'm not doing that just to do it. I'm doing it to send a message.
But that happened, correct?
Oh, yeah, it definitely happened.
Where did that happen?
That happened all along.
With the bodies hanging on the overpass. I heard...
I know it happened around like Tijuana. Really all across the board. Because once one started doing it, they all started
heads
doing
in a bag.
Yeah,
8 heads in a duffel bag.
That kind of stuff. They would just... It's a movie. These are messages. But what would happen is, they would go in, so like the local gang, whoever the local street gang is, like cartel says, you work for us now.
And so that's how MS-13.
And that's how MS-13 comes to be. So they're like, you work for us, so they've got all the guns, they've got all the power. They find whoever the toughest street gang is
in society. Like they're pulling from, like you're saying, doctors and lawyers. Like, okay, we're going to need some intelligence people,
right?
Military types, and we're
Right.
also going to need scum of the earth
Street gangs.
violence from these MS-13 types.
Right.
But all of these are just factions that exist within society.
Right.
Just like you're going to have this tier of intellectuals, perhaps doctors, lawyers, people that you're going to need for the cartel as well.
So imagine like a bunch of Navy SEALs going and taking a local street gang in L.A. and saying, "You work for us now." Local street gang says no. What do you think the SEALs are going to do? Just at that point, what happened?
Probably get another local street gang, which is going to work for them, to take out that local street
Well,
gang.
that's exactly. I mean, they do it but they just do it with their own. They just bring their own special forces out. They bring in the A team just to take out whoever this is. So what you learn is you just don't say no, right? So they'll take whoever the local street gang is, force them to be on the payroll, and then if they resist, then they just kill them.
They handle them the same way.
Yeah, it's just, and so it just becomes a thing, and that's where you get, so you got people who are enforcers like that, and then you've got intelligence, so they're just paying some dude at the taco stand, to tell him, report back what he's seeing while he's out there, It's super. The thing people don't realize is how intricate and how deep it goes. El Chapo, folk hero in a lot of parts of Mexico, right? He's the guy who broke out of prison.
Yeah.
He went to the bathroom and never came back. And they said, well, they dug a tunnel, and he dug out. And people just like, oh, that's just a bunch of dudes with shovels. No, because he had like an electric bike when he got there and some sort of rail system that he could lights to get out. Like they actually contracted guys who were like former silver mine workers that had gone under. And so these are like actual professional engineers, tunneling engineers to do this stuff, which goes back into the whole world of the wall, whether it works or not.
It doesn't.
What it does, the best way I heard it described is it presents the illusion of enhanced security. So the cartels can actually charge people more money to smuggle stuff across. Because they control the border. I mean, they're the ones controlling what comes across from their side, who and what. And so they're like, oh no, there's a wall there, so we have to charge more. It's not harder for them. They have to.
It's a perception thing.
It's a perception thing.
Just like sending, imagine civilians as bystanders when these messages, the hanging bodies and the heads and the bags
Right.
and stuff are getting found. Like the public opinion, the hearts and minds of the.
Right. And it's like supply and demand. It's economics. If I can convince you that it's tougher than it really is for me, then you'll pay more.
True.
And that's what they do. It is what it is. And you go to New Orleans, you just kind of expect, New Orleans has its own culture. That's where you go there, and it's just the border has its own rules. And you kind of have to learn how to work that. And you can't kid yourself that there's not people on both sides of that border who are on the payrolls.
That's frustrating. I mean, but I guess that's when you start going deep, so to speak, of, are we ever going to know who those people are? And are they, is that just something that you have to deal with, and that there is no social justice for that situation and system, and it's systemic, and it's been in place, and it's going to be in place, and we can talk about it, but maybe it's just going to keep evolving instead of getting better.
The thing is, you're asking me about the marijuana a while ago, and I've heard that question come up. If we legalize marijuana here, will that kill their the money flow? And the answer is part of that is yes, but what they do is they just jump to something else. They may replace marijuana with heroin.
What is the number one drug coming in from the cartels?
These days, I'm not actually even sure. I mean, there's still a lot. Drugs are come in fashion and go out of fashion. Like methamphetamine's a pretty big one these days. What are some of the other ones? I mean, marijuana still comes across because you see that coming across in bales all the time.
That's so wild because everybody I know that has anything to do with cannabis is like, that's Mexican weed, Reggie.
Right.
Or whatever they like. It's just like frowned upon in the culture, is something like, we're way past that as a country. Like we have Colorado.
We have much better stuff here, right? That kind of.
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
talking the other day when I went. I was in Vegas the week it went recreational in Vegas, and also the week the governor was like, "You better grow more weed, or we're taking over the industry. We need your taxes."
Right?
I mean, but it is. It become such a taxed industry. Like they sold out the first week.
I was at my niece got married this past summer. I went to Colorado. It was Denver for the wedding, and we were staying at the Embassy Suites. Right across the street was this dispensary called the House of Dank. Like huge, it was huge, and I thought it was just like. And I was told there's this dispensary across the street. I just thought it'd be like a little head shop or something like that. Now it's like a freaking warehouse, and like then you realize like and you walk out, literally standing out in front of the hotel. It just smells like marijuana. It's that skunky smell. And
I don't know how people could even smuggle it because of that.
And it's like, and then you realize like, oh, they're not just selling it there; they're probably growing it in there too. There's just there's probably
a lot of in like our state. When there can't be like in our state, there's not a dispensary you'll walk into without your card. Right. So, but they have the dispensary side for patients and the grow side, the like cultivation side, are like at the same place.
Yeah.
Oftentimes. So, the one that's going in Russellville is going to be like that.
Really?
It's going to be you're going to have your grow site and your dispensary at the same location.
I mean, it's a pretty decent sized building. I've been watching because I drive by it when I come into work, and so like,
you take that way to get here.
Yeah.
Nice.
I take Highway 7.
Should I take that way to go to Morrilton?
No. That's not the straight path.
It's not.
I live like more towards like you're going to Hot Springs. So.
Yeah. I've driven that way on 7 so many times.
Yeah.
Did you lose the ability to be able to take that route? Yeah, you would. Well, you weren't here when the river flooded.
Yeah, I would have lost my ability to get. I started thinking about. I don't think I could have actually made it to work when the flood was here.
Yeah.
I think the only way I could have made it to work is if I drove an hour in the wrong direction, like to go to Benton or Little Rock or somewhere over there, and then come around. And that was just
some people like Warnick. Well, Jason Warnick. We had a boxing show, and I drove 7 to Hot Springs, and he went like through Little Rock. And I was like, "Dang, man, that's a wave. Like that's some extra time." And he's like, "Yeah, I think I figured that out." But then he took Ian back. We went back 7, and Ian got sick that night.
Yeah, you got to know how to drive those curves.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, driving back and forth 7 on a boxing tournament is when I first discovered that guy I was telling you about earlier, Dan Carlin. Hardcore history.
Yep.
So, it's a real good drive. Like you're saying, driving 13 hours is a real good time to listen and get caught up on all sorts of stuff.
It's weird going to Texas, like, because I don't live on 7, I live off of it, but about kind of halfway between here and Hot Springs. But like when I would go, I'll just drive 7 all the way to Arkadelphia, hit I-30.
That's what I would do.
And go. And
I like going to Dallas that way better than through McAllister.
I do too.
I hate taking. At one time, I got a speeding ticket going through McAllister. I was going like 5 over, and they gave me a ticket. And I had a cop with me, same guy who I was telling you earlier, whose cousin was a black belt, and called and congratulated me when I got promoted. And he was just like, and I had a we had just trained some cops, and I had the syllabus, and we were trying to be like, he's a cop, he has a gun, we got this syllabus here, we train people like you, we're going to this jiu-jitsu tournament, please. And he's like, yeah, okay, we'll see you later, here's your ticket.
Yep.
I was like, all right.
Yeah, I don't really I don't.
Apparently speed traps.
I figured, it kind of is. I figured out a way to get down there where I can avoid just about every major city. I'll take, and it's what's funny about Texas is like the thing that's always annoyed me about driving Highway 7 is getting behind somebody from Texas because they don't know how to drive curves, right?
I hate driving on the Pig Trail. Up going through to Huntsville to Eureka Springs from Ozark. That one's rough on me. Corey got sick last time we did it.
See, I don't get sick, but it's just one of those. If it's a 25-mile-an-hour curve, you don't have to take it at 20 with your brake on.
Man, and what's crazy is you'll get congested. You get behind like a string of 7 cars or something.
And nobody can pass.
Yeah.
And that first guy just won't pull over. So now, but then, after living in Texas for most of a year, I'm just like, oh, you guys don't actually have curves here or hills. So this physics doesn't apply. You just don't understand these physics.
Yeah.
So straight and fast. Actually, the thing there, it's weird. They're either driving 20 over the speed limit or 20 under. Like there's no...
Yeah.
And they just now passed like a speeder impeder law. So you've got to move over now.
Okay, really?
So, yeah.
I didn't know that. Nice, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have driven back from Hot Springs many a times, like at night, like past 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, after fights and stuff. And it's actually when I prefer to drive it because I'll not get behind anybody and just like, man, I can vaporize that time from where I turn on 7 off Central at Hot Springs to Dardanelle.
Yep.
Just
The only thing with that, you got to watch out for deer. Come around a curve,
Yeah.
pop over a hill, and you got Bambi sitting in front of you.
true that. I've actually, it's been a long, long time, but I haven't hit a deer in a long time. But I see them all this Pleasant View out here. The road we used to get here, they're everywhere.
Pretty much all the dings on my truck are from deer.
Yeah, just bumping them and stuff.
And one turkey buzzard. My hood is dinged right on the front.
I hit a hawk one time with my van in high school.
Yeah, I hit a turkey buzzard to 75. And
Crack your windshield or anything?
now it hit my hood, so it's like I've got a dent in my hood, right on the very front of my hood from that thing, because it went down for roadkill right when I was passing it. And
My dad did something like that one time when I was a kid, and the buzzard threw up on his hood, and it reeked,
bet.
and it was green. I never seen anything like it.
I think, don't they like throw up on things as like a self-defense kind
Yeah, I
of thing?
think
That's a
so, and
thing they do?
it reeks, man. It's like the most putrid. Just
I mean, they eat roadkill. What do you eat? It's not going to smell good.
yeah. Oh man. So how long were you engaged in this? Like, how long were you living this life of the immersion into this situation? And like, man, did it change you in any way? Like, do you feel like it like imprinted on your life? Like, are you more grateful? Like, what sort of takeaways did you have from that experience? And are you still having?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still doing it. Like, I haven't been down in a while, but so yeah, I started going summer of 18, and I haven't stopped. Like right now, I'm teaching, so I'm not down there right now, but I still stay in contact with all these people. Yeah, I mean, part of it's perspective. You start understanding first world problems versus the rest of the world problems. I'll tell you one of the things that's really sort of helped me from an overall perspective is, I was born and raised in Arkansas, and we've been talking about sort of this Russellville mentality, and you always sort of feel like there's something off here, but you're not really sure what it is. Like there's something just feels like something's a little off here. Getting out of the state for a while and then turn around and looking back and sort of seeing it, and you get the 30,000 foot view, there is a certain level of fatalism that exists around here that I didn't find in Texas, like South Texas anyway. Here we have like a lot of conservatism, a lot more Bible Belt sort of conservatism, which plays out in local politics all the time. And then the other side is I deal with this a lot with my students. Is sort of this: you're dealing with people sort of have an understanding that they're never really going to amount to much. Like I'm gonna work at the local company. I'm gonna go to the local thing. But you say something like, you could go to New York, or you could really thrive in this other. Nah, I couldn't do that. And they shut it down without ever trying.
At what point do you think? I think at some point everybody makes that choice.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought a lot about what you just described as a person, and like, because I was just told Corey like a few days ago, I was like, I will never be satisfied.
Right.
I got ideas and goals and more ideas
right.
and these ideas and those ideas. Like I want more time and stuff, but I have these ideas.
Right. I got a laundry list of stuff I want to accomplish.
And it's just like a never-ending need to satiate. But
right.
I wonder at what point did like somebody have ideas like that and just like, oh well,
I don't know.
It didn't work, so I guess
it's almost cultural because like if you notice a lot of times when you talk about that, people are just like, why can't you just be happy with where you are right now? Like I get that sort of grounding stillness, like this is where you are now. Appreciate where you are now. I get that. But there's also this idea that this is where I am now, and there's no chance that I could ever be anything else that I run into a lot with people. Like, I work at for my journalism students, I'll work at a local paper. I'll work at one of the stations in Little Rock. I'll do something. They don't really expect that they can ever, like the thought that they could do more never crosses their mind, nor has it ever really been presented to them as an option, is the other thing. Like it's kind of a cultural thing. Like, don't go off there. There's scary things out there. Like if don't go to New York, don't go to California, don't go to Dallas or Nashville or Just
Don't
stay,
expand your consciousness.
no, stay here. Stay here. It's safe here. And that's one of these things that's really this sort of kind of thing I've really been sort of exploring myself is like the sort of idea of staying safe.
Safe spaces.
Stay safe. Like protect yourself, stay safe. And one of the things I'm dealing with on the border is people who are like they realize that this place their world isn't safe, and so they're seeking somewhere it's safe. I interviewed a guy from Cameroon. So it's
that's where the famous UFC fighter Francis Ngannou's from.
Okay, so he's right there on the border with Nigeria, and there's a lot of conflict going on there that you never hear about in the news. It's because they have this. In Africa, a lot have like French-speaking countries. That's kind of their primary. It all goes back to empires of days past, and colonies. And this was a French area, and this was an English area.
I'm going over that in class right now.
All right, so in Cameroon right now, you have got these the English-speaking population versus the French-speaking population. The French-speaking are the ones in power, and they're pushing out the English speakers, which seems kind of weird for us now. And so they were trying to do some like peaceful protest, just because they like wouldn't allow you to speak English in school. They wouldn't hire any English speaking professors. They wouldn't enroll. Like if you were an English speaker, your chances of getting enrolled in the university were almost next to nothing.
I will say we saw that with German after World War II in this country.
Yeah, I'm sure. Remind me to get back to Germany here in a little bit in Arkansas history.
For sure.
Something I recently
Dr. Black Moon, right?
recently found out on. But anyway, this guy was in Cameroon, and he was part of a peaceful protest. It was just literally a peaceful protest of I want to speak English in school, and they got military, paramilitary police showed up and just started killing people. And he ended up.
Was this recently?
Yeah, this was This was August of 2018 is when he experienced it because I met him in November. He was at the border. He's one of the guys I met at the border.
So I didn't. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So he got. So this is one of the coolest stories and the most heart-wrenching stories I'd heard. I actually met him at a refuge in Mexico. He hadn't made it in yet. He was still waiting to try to get in. And he was. They were getting gunned down. People around him were getting shot. He's starting to run. The guy right next to him got shot and killed. And there's one point he just like stopped, held up his hands, and I surrender. They grabbed him, drug him behind a car, just beat him half to death with the stocks of the rifle. One of his other friends got shot in the leg. Ended up throwing him into a prison or local jail, I guess, and just waiting. And they just kept calling them cockroaches and said, "You're all going to die." And he said every day they would come in, grab somebody, drag them out. You would hear screaming. He would just say, how did he describe it? You would just hear, basically violence being inflicted on this person, and then you'd hear gunshots, and then that was it, and they would never come back. And like every day, somebody new would get drug out. Same kind of interrogation. The guy had a bullet wound in his leg. They just let him die. Like he bled out in the cell, and he just watched his friend die. No medical treatment, and just and they were mocking this guy. Kind of a shitty sort of experience going on, right? This isn't, and so he ended up finding a guy that was he knew from kind of non-political who worked in this jail, and this goes back to kind of tell you how stuff works in other countries. He's like, "Why are you here?" And he told the guy, like, "I got arrested. Didn't do anything. I'm just." And so he goes, "Oh, I'll be back a little while later," and he comes back and he said, "I've got a way to help you." He said, "If you stay here, they're going to kill you. Like you're going to get executed." And like he said, they're going to execute you soon. He said, and he said, he goes, "If you can pay," and I think it was like, "If you can pay me like $1,000, I can get you out of here." And he's like, "Well, he's like, maybe I can't remember if that was the amount off the top of my head, but he's like, "I don't have that much. I have about half of that amount in my house, but it's all yours if you want it. If you get me out of here." And so the guy's like, "Okay." And he said they showed up about midnight, and they used that money. He got him out, smoking him out in the middle of the night, but used that money to pay off all the other guards. Mm-hmm. And then they took him to the Nigerian border, and he got a car, and they smuggled him out. And he said, if we find you again, he said, yeah, we helped you to get out, but if we catch you, we'll kill you. Because we got to tie up any loose ends, because if it ever gets back that we helped you escape, then they're going to kill us. So you're a marked man from this moment on. And so he smuggled himself into Nigeria in a taxi.
So was he just like a nameless person, or was he in their system they had him pegged? We know you.
Just a dude. Just imagine the average student at the university. That's all he was. He was 20, 22, somewhere in there. Got out. He said, I can't stay in Nigeria because Cameroonian officials can't, Nigeria lets them come in to hunt them. So he gave me this sort of, I have a record. Well, it's actually on my website. You can watch the interview with him because it's just his hands, because he wouldn't let me show his face or give you his real name. It's the whole process where they take him out. He gets himself to Central America. He goes all across Africa to get out, to fly out, gets to Central or South America, works his way back up, and he's gone through all this stuff. Like, this is like a 2-month ordeal for him to get out to this point. And I asked him the question. I was like, if you could go anywhere in the world right now, I mean, you had the money to get yourself here, right? Why here? Like, why the United States? And this is kind of the ultimate question. You could go to Europe, you could go to anywhere else. He said, it's only in the United States that I actually feel safe. He goes, even here in Mexico, they could pay off one of the police and my country could have me killed. In the United States, I'm safe. It wasn't about the money for him. He said it was a chance for an education and to be safe. That was it. Those are his only 2 things that kept him there. And so, this is kind of the world, so you ask, like, what would make somebody do that? That's the kind of stuff, you're literally going to get executed by your local police. And and so to deport somebody like that back to where they came from is a death sentence. Like, if they're back, they die. They either have to try to leave again.
So he was down at the border trying to get across, and he may get deported back.
Maybe. I mean, he was one of those guys applying for asylum. When I'd met him, he'd been there, a couple of months. And then they got on a bus and tried to go to the western side of Tijuana, because the other thing on the Mexican side is they're always talking to each other. There's always like a rumor mill where it's easier to get across. You ever been to a music festival? Obviously, you've been to a music festival.
Look around.
Imagine, so one of the other things that happened with the Trump administration is they shut down the number of people they'll let cross each day across the actual checkpoints, the actual ports of entry. And so if you're applying for asylum, that's just a trickle of what they'll...
So that damn thing's up too.
That's part of where the big damn... And so one of the things is they're actually sort of... It's like being at a music festival and they've only got one outhouse. There's only one porta potty.
Man, I've tried to leave some music festivals,
right?
And it was crazy. They funnel you out of one entrance, really.
So, yeah, and so we're I'm saying to you, everybody, it's like when you talk about illegal entry, it's like being in a music festival of 20,000 people and they got 3 outhouses, right? And then you're complaining because people are peeing on the grass, right? You create an environment, and I would argue you're intentionally creating an environment which forces people to try to do something drastic. These are people in kind of traumatic situations in a lot of scenarios. There's some that are gaming the system. I'm not going to argue that there aren't. The vast majority of them aren't. They're just trying to get somewhere safe where they have a chance to make it. But you create this environment where it sort of forces them to do something desperate. Desperate people will do desperate things. And if you turn that, and I could argue that that's a strategy. If I can put them in a scenario where they're more likely to cross illegally, that gives me more ammunition to deport them. So that's kind of where you are down there. And so I met a kid from Bangladesh. He's a teenager, 16, 17. Same kind of thing. He's going to get killed. They tried to rope him into a local gang. He wouldn't join. Okay, we're going to kill you. He escaped. He ended up going. And he is, again, one of the things that's interesting is it didn't really matter how many times I interviewed people. It was always kind of some real similar narrative. Awful thing, awful journey, and then you get to the border and you're stuck. And
what's crazy is you haven't told me a story. I mean, you just mentioned a couple, but like none of these people are from South America like I thought they would be.
Nah, it's yeah.
Which I'm sure there are.
I've met some,
but it's more diverse.
Yeah, it's.
I did not. That's kind of why I was asking this question. I did not. I was thinking like, this is regime change wars that we started. I heard this narrative and I liked it.
I have met people from. Oh, let me actually. The kid from Bangladesh, once he got to the fence in Tijuana, it was only like 10 feet tall, and he jumped it. He immediately got caught. He didn't intentionally because he just. Here, I present myself for asylum. What he told me, he's like, after everything I've been through, a fence means nothing to me. And I thought, that says a lot. You talk about somebody who's going to get executed. What do they care about a fence or crossing a fence? Like, what are you going to do?
Or our politics?
Any of it. Like, that's, you're dealing with somebody on a completely different emotional level. But I met people from a lot of Guatemalans, a lot of El Salvadorians, a lot of these Central America, this little triangle.
Yes, those are places I was
There's lots of those people, too. I met people from Africa. I met lots of people from Cameroon. I met Bangladesh, China, Russia. I mean, and this is what I'm talking about. The only way, if they're from overseas, they can get here is to come through the Central America route. And so they all come this way. What I read was, because you also get a lot of people going across the Mediterranean into Europe. And they said for those folks,
I wondered about that.
the safer path, those are two different migration paths. They said the people who have more resources and a better family will come through do the America path. The people without resources will do the Mediterranean because that one's actually far more dangerous. Because that's where you're throwing 500 people on a boat that's meant for 100, and that's where you see you hear about a raft gets capsized in the Mediterranean, and everybody drowns. That's what's going on there. So they don't have any resources.
What sort of boat migration are you seeing? Like, are you seeing people go, like, into Florida? Like, is that just a Cuban
That would be more of a Cuban
stuff?
thing. And we get a lot of Cubans that come through Mexico, too. That's the other thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
they'll come through. They'll come through. I was talking to one guy, going back to the cartels. He was on a riverboat somewhere, and he said he was on a barge that was just completely loaded down with drugs. And he was just taking selfies in front of it. That was funny.
What? Have you heard about, like, man, why do I always keep hearing about, like, every time there's a storm, they're like, more cocaine washed up on the beach.
$25 billion a year industry.
It's just so much of it that they accidentally lose so much of it that it and money washes up on the beach all the time. That blows my mind.
I mean, and that's just what, again, this is why I kind of chuckle now, because I used to be a cop and we're like, cops will pose like we got 10 pounds of marijuana in a car going down the interstate, and they're posing with it like it's a trophy deer. And I thought, you have no idea how much you're missing. Like, one of the things on the border, like, they'll send a dummy car through with maybe a pound of marijuana or something, let some dude get busted because the car right behind it's got, a ton, and they'll just, let's get them occupied trying to tear this little car apart when this truck goes through with a big load on it.
Wow.
It's fun times, right?
Did you talk to any border security about anything like that, about, like, bus, like what they're looking for, like their processes, anything like that?
They have there's a lot of technology that's involved these days, a lot of, like, sniffing type stuff. They've got infrared stuff that can look for, like, body heat for if they're trying to smuggle. There's, like, human trafficking is another thing. It's not just drugs. That's the other thing. Cartels will do anything that's illegal because that's just their bread and butter. So we can talk about human trafficking from like what we think of as human trafficking to, like, smuggling immigrants across. Of the two bridges, or there's 3 bridges in Matamoros to go to Brownsville. There's one where everybody stacks up. And give you kind of an idea, the new thing with the Trump administration for asylum seekers is the remain in Mexico stuff. So they get vetted, and they have to get given a court date, which may be 2-3 years down the road.
Oh, my gosh.
They kick them back to Mexico now to wait. And so they don't have anywhere to go, and Mexico doesn't have the infrastructure.
So they just hang out.
They're living on the street, mostly. When I went there the first time, there's a nonprofit I work with called Team Brownsville, and they're feeding people on the bridge because they just realized they kind of have this surplus of homeless folks kind of hanging around in Brownsville, and then they found out what it was, these migrants waiting to kind of get on a bus, and they didn't know what they were doing. And then they found out that there was all these other people waiting on the other side of the bridge, and so they started going over there, and they started taking meals, and they were feeding about 50 people a night when I first went over there. This week, they said they were feeding about 600.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's part of that. kicking them out and sending them right back. But that bridge where you have to kind of wait your turn can take months. You can go to the other bridge, which is cartel controlled. You can pay, I've heard numbers from $300, $600, and get a fast pass, and you get pushed to the top of the list to who they'll invite across. So even if you get invited across now, there's a good chance that you'll get kicked back. But you just kind of, you pay to play. But the new thing that kind of blew my mind is they're in the oil and gas as well now.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
They tap into pipelines, steal oil, sell it, or gas.
Wow, which Texas is huge for, right? I mean,
this is happening in Mexico. Like, they'll do this in Mexico. They tap into oil and gas lines in Mexico. And so, like, a lot of times the gas stations, like, what was the, in Laredo right now, there's pay attention to the news on the border around Laredo. You're probably going to start seeing some gang violence popping up in the news soon, because there's a turf war going on between kind of a dying cartel and another one coming in. And
what kind of? That's like the second sort of time you've described a power shift. So to speak.
It's because they're constantly evolving. I think it's sort of a leftover. I don't know, because the Zetas were really powerful back about 2011. That's when it was getting really hyper violent. That was mostly the Zetas behind all that. They're mostly imploded. There's kind of remnants of them left. There's remnants of the Gulf Cartel left, and then there's another one. I can't remember, but it's all. What happens is just an evolution of one grows out of the other. It's kind of that Hydra thing. A new one comes up. Mm-hmm. But they were telling the cartels were basically strong-arming all the local fuel stations and saying, if you fuel up any government vehicles, like the military vehicles or police coming in there, we'll burn your gas station down.
So they just got to tell the military that comes through, like, hey.
Sorry, you can't get gas here.
Wow.
So
that's control.
Yeah, and so they had a big protest. There was some sort of gas protest in Matamoros back during the summer, and I think that was probably something to do with that as well. So it's just, so it's like I said, the cartel stuff runs deep. And they also have legitimate businesses, too, because that's how they fence all their money.
I was thinking about that earlier when I kept saying doctors and lawyers, because it's like people with legitimate businesses and professions.
Yeah, and that's like one of the things I've heard, like, don't go to Cozumel because, there's violence there. And somebody actually said, he goes, no, you really don't have to worry about going to those like resort cities because it's in the interest of the cartels to keep those things running smooth. They want tourist dollars flowing in because they have legitimate business ties there. Like they're invested in the T-shirt shop just as much as anybody else. But again, these create pathways to launder money. Especially if you have lots of cash businesses.
So, yeah, they probably have sort of like a mafia-type structure.
It's definitely a mafia-type structure. They initially modeled themselves after the Italian mafia, like the Sinaloa cartel.
I mean, that's how I set up the gym, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
mafia.
When I was going to go into business, I was like, I'm going to strong-arm these other gyms. They're going to pay me.
You're going to work for me now. You're going to pay me protection pay.
Oh, man. You blow my mind at least half a dozen times on all this.
Oh, good.
What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are? Because that's what I like to. Because there's we've said a couple times, the narrative. Like, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions that people are proliferating on the internet right now?
One of it is what kind of people are trying to get across.
That's everything you've talked about with that is
mostly who I met, and I've met hundreds, mostly young families, lots of women probably in their 20s with young toddler age children, or young children, like their elementary age children, lots of those folks. Lots of young guys too. I mean, a lot of them they're young families is what a lot of them are. And so when you hear stuff like they're just recycling the same kids over and over and over again, I have no doubt that they're probably doing some of that, but I would argue that's probably a small percentage of who's actually showing up. Those are just really easy facts and figures to throw out there to kind of scare people.
So, yeah, I know, and that's kind of I felt like that's what Crenshaw was doing in that talk.
He kind of was.
And then, but at the same time, I'm glad you kind of went into like internationally, in terms of bringing the Africa but that because I'm like, okay, well, people need to be able to migrate here from other countries too, besides just South American countries.
Right.
Like that's what I like. That was something in my mind that I was like that he brought up on like that's like I'm like, yes, I thought that.
Right.
But I never. It's one of those things that like I don't even really commentate on all this very much because it's like. Hey, I'm just pro human rights,
right.
and let's be on Team Human. Team Human.
I think there's the thing that's, I would argue, one of the misconceptions. One, people don't realize the backlog of the court system. That's a huge deal.
Or the number of people, Mike. When I asked you about the 100,000,
I've heard a backlog of cases somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million, and so. Like I heard a story, it was from an immigration lawyer. It said one of his clients, I forgot, waited 2 or 3 years for his court case to be heard. And it's not just asylum seekers; it's everybody in this process. He'd waited like 2 or 3 years for his court case to be heard. He was ready. This is out on the West Coast somewhere, and whatever day it was, judge was sick that day, so they just postponed all this, and they backlogged him another 2 years.
Oh my gosh!
And so just sort of imagine waiting to kind of get your life. You're just waiting for this day. Judge is sick. Sorry, You gotta, we're gonna reschedule you. It's 2 years before we get to see you again. So that's a big one. The change where you see, like I was telling you, there's this, people are stacking up behind the border. Imagine being at Walmart on Black Friday and they've got one checkout line open. That's kind of what you got going on there. It's when you get sort of, except it's not really Black Friday because there's not this huge group of people coming in all at once. It's just, we've just got one guy. And you just slowly, it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up. But still, there's 15 other registers that could be, occupied, but there's nobody sitting there. And so you see that a lot.
My dad's so pissed off about the self-checkout lines.
I hate them. I saw, the first one I saw was in Colorado about 20 years ago. And I thought, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. And then
I saw a bunch of old people at the pickup line today when I was
I absolutely refuse to go that route. I'm kind of, I just can't bring myself to do it.
The pickup?
I don't. Yeah, I want to go.
Core does it. We do it for I'll tell you where it's nice. The gym water. That's why I ran back inside. I thought there would be a case of water in there. Core told me to bring a case of water home, and somebody put them in the fridge already. But we did the Walmart pickup for the water.
So if I'm going in and I'm going to buy, package of bacon, like I want to personally pick up my.
I know. I've thought about that several times. Like, man, I worked at Walmart when I was like a teenager.
I'm not going to grab the first thing I see. I'm going to check my eggs closely, make sure there's, none of them are cracked.
Yeah,
I'm going to.
Can't have a 17-year-old making those decisions.
No, I don't need somebody making those kind of life choices for me.
Yeah, like like buying things like lettuce and stuff like that, vegetables.
Right.
I definitely do want to inspect that.
Not all avocados are created equally.
That's why I have some on my windowsill in there, man. They're not ripe, and it's making me sad.
Yeah. But they'll be ripe for like 30 minutes, and then they'll be mush.
Man, we actually bought Cora, like, because the avocados weren't ripe, bought some, like, a store-bought avocado, and I never liked those, but this one is actually pretty good.
I'll tell you one of the things I'm having withdrawal syndrome right now. South Texas Texas has this grocery store chain. It's kind of like Kroger's, H-E-B. Oh, my gosh. But you can go in there, and these places... You know how like grandmothers here, like everybody's like competing over who's got the best biscuits, or something like that. Down there, it's like tortillas, and so you can go into H-E-B and tortilla, and they've got fresh tortillas. You pick up the package, it's warm, and then you can go over to the produce aisle, like they've got fresh guacamole and fresh pico de gallo, and they're just making it. They're in the store.
Imagine if we went I saw the stats on how many avocados we import from Mexico, and if we were to like go sideways with them in a trade war or something.
Like
I was just like, man, no, don't
take away my guacamole. Like,
oh man, they had when Corey and I went to it wasn't Cozumel, but it was close. It was Playa del Carmen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the
Hard Rock Resort down there. Yeah. So, but man, guacamole everywhere, every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So like they had mass amounts of it. It's like this is just a part of like every day they woke up and made guacamole.
I went to I was in Mexico. It was Matamoros. There's this restaurant right there within walking distance. So we went there and Lady beside me got like a side order of guacamole with her meal. Like it literally came out like a salad bowl. Like it was heaping. She probably got a pound of guacamole. And I'm like, who eats that much guacamole in one sitting? But she tried.
Dude, let me tell you a weird story. I was in Nashville 2 weeks ago. We were at Chewy's. Chewy's in Northwest Arkansas.
Right.
It's pretty good. We've been there a few times. And they, like, I mean, I like queso. I like guacamole.
Right.
Cora never wants to get guacamole with dinner, but they had this, like, thing that was, like, queso and guacamole to get, get together. But, dude, they put the guacamole in the queso. And I was like,
what are you doing that for? These two are...
what if you, like, I was like, I mean, I was really, I was taken aback.
Yeah.
I couldn't deal with what was going on.
These are not flavors I want. Like,
Yeah.
I don't mind them both being side by side. I'll go here and
When I tried to do, like, the guacamole's in the middle. And it was like a moat of cheese around it.
Did you try to scoop it out?
Oh, I did, but then it got submerged. So then I was just, like, very upset.
At that point, you just sort of just mix
That's a first world problem, dude. I was,
my guacamole's touching my queso.
oh, man. But yeah, and it turned the queso a very weird color.
I'm sure
because
it
was
did.
like it was. Plus, when you hear queso, what color is queso?
It's kind of white.
It's got to be white,
yeah.
right? Now, I mean, if we're talking Sobeys cheese dip, it's going to be yellow, but they
Right.
have the white version.
Right.
But when I hear queso at a Tex-Mex restaurant, because let's just choose this Tex-Mex all the way, but let's just say after all the times I've eaten there, way more Tex than Mex.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I've concluded.
It is.
So
I used to go to these taquerias down in Corpus, or I still do, I guess. Like, you know how all gas stations here sell fried chicken or whatever?
Yeah.
They all have tacos. Like, you can buy, like, they'll make tacos for you in there. But they're like, they're not the tacos you think you're going to get here. And so I would go with some of my Mexican friends, and we would go out. I was like, I want to get tacos. I was like, it's all in Spanish. Like, what's that one? They're like, just order it. Don't, I'm just like,
don't question.
Don't quite, just, I'll tell you what it is after you eat it.
Now I'm super paranoid about eating at food trucks, and not even that Cora ate at a food truck, but Cora has food poisoning today. Like, she came, like, I fell asleep on the couch last night. She went to a concert last night with some of her friends. Mm-hmm. And, man, I'm just crashed out with the dog. She comes kicking. She told me she didn't feel well.
Right.
But then I fell asleep on the couch watching Ancient Aliens. And she kicks the door open, like, I threw up on China. I threw up 13 times.
Oh, my gosh.
I threw up on the side of the interstate.
Her
like,
abs have to be so sore.
oh,
today.
yeah. Well, then that was before she got here. She threw up all night and threw up at least one time today. I was just like, oh, man. I work with a guy, Trey McCool. His wife got food poisoning. Mm-hmm. And they were like driving back from Dallas, Texas or something. She ended up getting in the hospital for 3 or 4 days.
Ugh. Yeah, no bueno. Mm-mm. No bueno.
What do you even do? I got Cora some charcoal tablets, but what do you even do for food poisoning? A purge, I guess.
Maybe it's self-serving. I don't know. But whenever I'm eating something questionable, I always like make sure I drink beer. Something with alcohol in it to kill. Like in my mind, I'm killing.
Dude, when you were eating those jalapenos,
you're
blowing my mind.
Really?
Yeah, I was just like,
I like hot food though.
Yeah, I was like, I couldn't even. Yeah, I don't. I kind of think I might have an allergy to it.
I've got you look at my dining room table. It's just a stack of like different hot sauces.
Yeah, like I one time a guy that used to come to the gym. We were having like a UFC party somewhere, and we were having something like everybody brought. It was like potluck style. Like everybody from the gym brought something. It was like, you ever see that movie The Elf, where like Will Ferrell's at the table and like pulls some syrup out of. It was like he was like pulled some Tabasco out of his jacket, and I was just like, dude, you just blew my mind. But it was just like that. He was just like, oh yeah. And it's just like, apparently whatever his wife cooks or anything, he doesn't even taste it. He's just like Tabasco all the way.
Sauce. There's a pizza place. It's a comedy club / pizza place close to my boat. And they have what's called pizza roulette. You can play. Just say you want to play pizza roulette. Order a large pizza. Before they put the cheese on it, they'll put 1 drop of like ghost pepper extract on one slice. It's not even cut up yet, so it's just on one. They'll put a drop of extract on this pizza, and then they'll put the cheese on it, bake it, slice it up. So one slice in that pizza is going to have that one drop of ghost pepper extract. Somebody's going to get it. You don't know who. So it's just, you just go out with friends.
It's a roulette, dude.
It's kind of I kept trying to get somebody to do it with me, but nobody else would do it.
Somebody needs to do like a deep fake of pizza roulette, but like with the deer hunter. Like put that scene. Have you seen? Man, some of the deep fakes they do. Like we watched Jason Lowe was on, and we watched Jim Carrey being put over Nicholson's face in The Shining. And dude, you couldn't tell. Like
I'm
the
sure.
deep fakes that people have done some deep fakes with Rogan.
Yeah.
That blow my mind because they'll just change it back to Rogan's face.
Yeah.
Like in the midst of the.
I saw it was a Rogan clip where they were putting Bill Clinton's face.
Yeah.
And he was talking like, I'm Bill, and they would put Bill's face while he's talking.
He does a pretty good Bill impersonation.
Does that stuff worry you?
It does.
I mean, you listen to like Elon Musk stuff and AI and that kind of stuff.
You want to know the most deep-rooted paranoid conspiracy theory I have is that if there are gods or a god, is that you're going to use technology to make the like what maybe people think of as the rapture or what have you. Maybe we're building the way that's going to happen.
I see.
For there to be no more bodies, like that we start literally putting our consciousness into this other reality, which is digital.
You know, like smart cars, okay, so this car I've got out there I'm test driving, it's got the driver assist stuff.
Yeah. My sister-in-law has a little bit of that.
I've never driven a car that had this on it, so I can set the cruise control and I can set this car length or whatever. And it's always looking to see if if I set the cruise control and I run up on another car that's driving slower, it'll slow down to match their speed.
I like that.
And it's really
Does it have cameras? How does it do that?
It looks like it has this eyeball kind of thing right on the
Like
bottom
a backup
front. Yeah, it's
cam,
kind of because I thought, it's like, what is that thing? And then I found out what this does. And I was looking into it, but those things, like, and I think a lot of the self-driving cars, a lot of they're taking readings about 2,000 times a second. They're super fast, like the way
Teslas that I've read about, and how many sensors they have around
and
the
they're
car.
so they're these things think so much faster than we do. And so when I started getting worried about stuff, it's just sort of the realization that we're going to keep handing more and more over. You get to do this. You get to do this. You get to do this. You get to do this.
Is that good or bad? Is that a good or bad trade-off?
I mean, there's certain things that I like, but there's others. I get long run it's probably going to be safer, but there's also this long run that we're going to diminish because we're asking like less of ourselves. I mean, it's like training. The more you do something, the better you get at it, right? The more you just sit on your butt and don't think, the weaker your brain gets, the weaker your body gets. And we're doing that kind of collectively because we're just handing more over.
Man, like I will self-admit that this is the number one thing wrong with my posture.
Uh-huh. Do you ever get like pains in like the back of your neck and your shoulder hurts because you're always doing this?
Man, I have and it's my left side. I'm left-handed.
And I had to go, like I went to the chiropractor and I was like,
who do you see?
I go to a guy. It's Underhill. Yeah,
I'm seeing a guy who's actually an upper cervical specialist in Morrilton. I'm seeing him on Wednesday.
I've heard of that guy.
York.
Okay.
Yeah, but everything apparently I got to see him a few times. He takes X-rays first, and I'm actually like running him through my insurance because he's a specialist. But he's basically going to traction the heck out of my neck, and I think he calls it Atlas alignment. But basically, like I've been feeling like I can't sit up straight. Like I've had this rib issue.
Yeah, and you're compensating.
Yeah, and like my head too, it feels like it's off. Like I feel like when I'm always having to try and be straight.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Yeah. And I'm trying to every day have good postural habits and sit right. Got all new furniture, new bed, new living room furniture, new office chair. I mean, I feel like these chairs aren't horrible.
Right.
But it's an everyday battle, and I'm like, man, I think I'm just out, and I got to get put back in and stay in. Like, there's no amount of postural correction I'm going to do unless I get like fixed, and I don't think surgery is a fix.
Right. I tell you what I did. I lived with like chronic. I actually need to go back and get a line now. Like like it was right above my like right butt cheek. It's like it's always hurting. It's like lower
Oh,
back.
I can show you. I did the guy that was on the podcast yesterday was talking about having sciatica, and I got
Yeah.
my myo ball out, and I was like, "You never heard of the piriformis muscle?"
Oh, and I found out because like what is it? Actually, it's my hips are out, and so
interior pelvic.
and
tilt.
so. And I'd lived with this for years, as kind of growing up. And I went to a chiropractor finally, and he's like, "Yeah, there's a few things." And he was the guy. I learned a couple of things. One that was correctable, and I'd been living with pain for all these years for no apparent reason. And the other was that it was completely due to me living on a farm,
What what activity?
driving a tractor. Because if you're driving a tractor, not just that, you're always looking over your shoulder, and so you're riding like this, and so you're bouncing on this one side.
Yeah.
And so those who aren't
know what
watching,
it-
I'm kind of twisting around, looking behind me, and I'm just bouncing on my kind of right hip.
You felt it.
and that's where it gets. And so it took like 3 sessions. He X-rayed me too then. And the other part was I found out I had like a little bit of scoliosis in my neck. He said because my head, like in photos, my head's just always a little over to the left.
That's what I've been doing with.
And it just kind of looks like, oh, you're people think I'm just listening intently because my head's kind of cocked over always. And it's like, actually, that's just a touch of scoliosis. So I have to kind of like work to try to keep my head up straight all the time because I don't even notice it because it just
That's
feels
what
normal.
that I think that's again from looking here, and
Yeah.
then too, I think because some issues with my hip, like
Yeah.
even though I got a new mattress and it's firm, like
Right.
I've been, and I stopped when I got the new mattress initially, but I've been sleeping on my belly.
Yeah.
And it's weird. I sleep on my bed, and I notice I'm like, that's a weird sleeping habit.
Yeah.
I was sleeping on my belly with my knee brought up towards my shoulder under a pillow. That's how I wake up, basically.
One of the things that really helps me, and I've heard it, and I finally started doing it. It's actually lifting weights and doing things like pull-ups.
Yeah.
Pull-ups will just sort of put traction on your back.
So
and
we should do David Goggins.
You should go full on Goggins. Just full on Goggins.
I'm
Just
trying to pull up my hands straight to
just,
the bone.
Just
dude.
yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Talking about Jocko earlier, and I was thinking about Goggins while you were
you-
they're like a package deal of crazy
Have
humans.
you ever
for
thought
me.
about the difference between Goggins and Jocko?
Apparently, they don't like each other.
I would imagine. I bet Jocko doesn't really like most. I mean, I'm saying Goggins doesn't like most seals because he talks a lot. If you read his book or listened to his book,
Yes.
he talks a lot of trash about the seals and
Apparently, Jocko is one of the guys he's talking about.
Really?
So like a friend of mine, he's been on the podcast, teaches morning jiu-jitsu. You may have met him. We'll meet him. But he's huge into Jordan Peterson. He's huge into Jocko.
Yeah.
And he is actually who got me kind of into Jocko. Like I kind of knew who Jocko was, but then I really got into him once I found out about the Fabio Santos connection and all that. So
but Goggins is just like this full throttle all the time, never stop. I'll quit.
arm of the mind.
And like I am, I won't quit when I'm tired. I quit when I'm done. And he's just all the time, and it's just brute force all the time. And then you've got Jocko, who's just kind of a bear of a human being. And then, but he's, you listen to him for 10 minutes, and you're like, this dude is really smart.
He's a leader.
But he always talks like this, and you're like, I'm Jocko. Good. Podcast 739. Check. And then, and you're like, and then he'll start doing his thing, and you're like, okay, this guy's got it together. And so, they're both SEALs. And then, but I'm like, these are two completely different kinds of human beings. And I kind of always wondered what that kind of relationship would be like. And I'm guessing, Goggins, I have a feeling, was doing a lot of the PR stuff just because he wasn't fitting in with the rest of the teams. And he even kind of said he was sort of a black sheep.
And I mean, I kind of just the basic narrative I picked up on is that was because he didn't really follow the narrative.
Right. He was doing something.
Of being
He would,
one of the boys. Or
right.
whatever.
He'd always kind of do his own thing.
Yeah.
So, and it may be, I don't know, but it's just kind of like both of them are just ridiculous human beings.
Did what got you even knowing about jiu-jitsu or even interested? You just said you did some martial arts previously, but
I did taekwondo growing up, and did it for years and years and years and years, and then went to college, and it's just like other things came up, and it just sort of fell in the background. Probably part of it was like listening, just seeing you, being friends with you on Facebook, and then listening to some. It seems to be it just kept showing up in my peripheral all around me.
It's a big part of the culture right
and
now.
that's why I asked you the other day. I was like, is jiu-jitsu like the new CrossFit?
It's faddish right now.
It's
and that's what I say. It's the new taekwondo.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, is it kind of the thing? And it was because I told you when I first saw it, I was just like, I don't really get it. It looks like wrestling, and I've watched him, and I've never been like a big one of like watching MMA and that kind of stuff either. And but then I just kind of started thinking about it, and it was less. I think it was listening to Jocko probably because he makes lots of. I don't know. He just makes lots of comparisons, like kind of how you use jiu-jitsu and how you think in regular life, and I'm just like, okay, this is more. It feels more like a mental discipline than more physical. It's a physical thing, but there's so much more brain work going on, and I don't know, it kind of intrigued me. And then but then I watched it, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. It just looks like sweaty dudes rolling all over each other, and I'm like, it kind of is, and you're like, am I okay with that? Yeah, okay, I'm secure enough in myself. I don't.
We were those dudes earlier.
I know, right?
For
about an hour. We were those guys.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay.
I felt rewarded afterwards. I was like,
but
got to work at it.
I'll tell you the other thing that's kind of come up for me in the past 5 years. I guess if you want to go down the Jordan Peterson road a little bit, is I've been watching the evolution of my guys in class versus the evolution of my girls in class.
Dude, it's crazy how many girls are in class.
I know. It's like, sometimes it's like, 3-1. Like,
yeah.
And when I'm talking about people that are actually engaged, like doing stuff, like being proactive, it's the girls. And I'm like, I ask the guys, like, hey, what are you guys doing? Because I always, if you've ever been in my class, I always start like, hey, tell me something interesting. Like, I go, when I call the roll, hey, do anything interesting? Tell me something interesting. And the guys are like, I didn't do anything. What'd you do? I didn't do anything. And it's like, and then over, I'm generalizing, but it just keeps falling back to this. Yeah, I just sat around my apartment, and played video games, or a lot of it's like I smoked weed and played video games. That's kind of all I did. Did you go to work? Yeah, I went. It was okay. And there's like no motivation. I'm like,
Joe Rogan's like, I smoked weed and then I went and ran with my dog and then I did 3 podcasts and then I did a stand-up special.
Right. And, crawled back in, then I played, then I played with my dog again.
Got in the float tank. What?
Like, how do you have that many hours in the day?
I don't know how he does it. That guy's a major inspiration for me, though.
He should be. And then but I see that. And so I've really kind of largely been having like concerns about my guys. Like, so you guys don't know how to be guys. Like I don't know what it is. I taught a Fight Club class.
I think I remember you
because I brought them to I brought them to Forza. I taught the class, and I would do this after thing I'd call Tribe, where it was completely voluntary. If you wanted to go, we'd just go do stuff. Everything from going and doing kickboxing with you guys to playing dodgeball out in the rain.
Woods did something similar with his governor's school kids.
And it was just like, let's just go do something ridiculous. And like, I had them doing push-ups in mud puddles, just because. More girls showed up to that than guys. And I'm just like, what's going on? What is going on? And there's like this overwhelming lack of motivation with my young guys. And so it's not feminism, but it's feminism's fine. I'm more like, strong women are great. I love strong women. But
my wife is we call her Sarge.
Your wife is a shining example of that. My wife's a shining example of that. She's,
She was running the boat while you were over here doing whatever at the cabin. I saw.
Right. And then, but I also want strong guys. Like, and I'm seeing guys just continually get down and down. They're not motivated. And they just sort of whatever. And then like they're not fulfilling their role and whatever that role should be. And I don't even think they know what it should be anymore. That's what I told them this week because I was kind of fussing at them.
You think this is linked to like our evolution of gender? Is that kind of why you brought up
part of it?
Peterson?
I mean, I think part of it is I think we've done, rightfully so, put a lot of emphasis on women need to be becoming stronger and better and having a bigger place in our life. But I think part of what we've done is the expense of not just telling guys to make way, but actually intentionally diminishing them. And you can see it from, like, if you talk about getting the media world, like the average sitcom. You don't have so many sitcoms anymore, but the average sitcom, like the dad is typically sort of this goofball, overgrown kid, right? Or you even watch things like The Hangover or stuff like that. You don't really have a lot of strong male role models in like the media and there's some, but sort of it comes culturally. You have like a smart, strong wife, and then kind of a goofball, dumb dad. Or there was what was it back in the early 2000s? I would call them like the hot mom sitcoms with the overweight, goofy dad. And those things play out, and I think you're just kind of dealing with sort of a generation of that kind of, it's the Fight Club thing. It's like, we're the first generation of men raised by women. We don't know what to do with ourselves, and I don't know. It concerns me. I don't know the solution for it, but I know I don't think it's sustainable.
What do you think about this movement, awareness of demonization of the idea behind toxic masculinity?
I don't know, but
because if anybody's a toxic male, it's you. And look at all the things we're into.
I'm definitely a toxic male as far as that. But I think that's one of the reasons you're finding that. Going back to the jiu-jitsu question, I think that's one of the reasons you're finding some of these things are becoming more popular is because, and this is what Jordan Peterson is becoming so popular is they're just like, here's somebody with strong opinions on what I should do, kind of give me directions in life. But I also think this is where you get ridiculous things like when you have like a rise of like white nationalism, because that's kind of what they jump into. Is like, and so that, you get toxic masculinity would be in that category. I'm a dude that just likes to live just a little bit of a Spartan life and kind of get out and do stuff.
You really are like the man's man. Like you build houses and
I don't feel like it though.
All sorts of stuff. Like, dude, I mean, it was hard for me to hang these frames on the wall. Okay, and they're not even put up with nails. Okay, I just want to point that out. They've got the sticky things on it. But like, I'm a poor example of a man, is what I say. It's like, yeah, I could submit you, but that's only because I approached it like an intellectual.
Right?
Right? It's like it has nothing. The physical ability side, that's kind of like what my approach was. I was trying to take with when we were working. It's like, look, for me, the stuff that I want to teach everybody knows no age, gender, size. That's like I was talking about. There's techniques that are like that. And that's the stuff that I want to be more in tune with. But I'm horrible at handiwork. Corey does all this stuff.
I just approach stuff like, why can't I do that? My handicap is mechanics. Like I'm a terrible mechanic.
I can working on my own cars. I can change my oil.
I can change my oil, change my tires. I can do basic stuff. But you ask me to like rebuild a carburetor, not gonna happen. Just not going to happen.
I can clean a carburetor.
And, so there's that stuff.
I need to rebuild a carburetor on a mower. It's not happening. But it's like I cleaned it out the number of times that I was able to. Now it needs a new one, and that's why somebody else mows my yard.
But I've just always, I grew up on a farm. We always you have to be a bit self-reliant when you're on a farm, especially if you're out in the sticks, because there's nobody around that can help you.
Find a way.
Yeah, and so you just kind of realize, all right, how do I do this? So like when I built my cabin, I didn't know how to build a log cabin. I mean, I read books on it, and I read, there's also a point of, all right, I'm just going to have to figure this out. I understand the principles. Now I actually have to do it. And then, it just starts slow. And it took me a while. Eventually I figured out and learned how to cut my own lumber and do all that, and I did it. And then, and then after that, the sailing thing came later. I was just like, I don't know how to sail.
Taught yourself how to build a house, taught yourself how to sail.
But when I talk about that fatalism that I was talking about earlier, nobody told me I couldn't do that stuff. Like nobody said you can't. No, you're not supposed to do that. And so I just approach it as like, it's just another thing I can learn. I know how to do other stuff.
I've been joking with people. I'm just like, I just realized I'm like a decently intelligent adult, and I can learn how to do stuff on my own.
No kidding, right?
And so then I've been like telling all the people behind me, like reaching back for them, like, hey, did you know that you could
can do stuff.
You can watch YouTube. Like like Roland at the gym, he's just like, it's all on YouTube. And I'm like, dude, it's all in your head, and you're 72 also.
When you're Mr. Miyagi, and he can just like, it's on YouTube.
I mean, like, that's funny. He's like, literally, he's giving me YouTube videos. Like, he'll bring up occasionally, I guess he probably catches fights on TV like everybody else, because fights is playing in the background of ESPN and other networks now. But he's like, you show me the Lyoto Machida John Jones submission. And I'm just like, okay. Well, let's do it. I taught a class about it, but I sent him a YouTube video, and I'll be talking about things in class, and he's like, hey, will you send me that video you mentioned? And I'm just like, yes, sir, 72-year-old man. Will you tell me about another? So, like, he told me about this Ip Man video on the wooden dummy. And I was like, man, and then he's like, yes, well, he died of cancer like the week after he did that. So why don't you look at this guy? He's doing it too. And, he does a more advanced version. See, he only did both sides on the first kata. You're supposed to do both sides on the whole thing. So this guy does both. And I was just like, He's been teaching me this one side Joe staff kata. And now he's like, and then we've been doing it heavy staff, light staff. And then he's like, okay, now we do the other side. Yeah. And I'm like, well, it's 31 moves. I'm like, I just figured out the 31 moves. Like, I sometimes still mess up on move 17. Like, and then he's like, the other side. The other side. So, like, you have to switch everything the way you hold it. See, and it's just alien.
But see, this is going back to what I said earlier. Like, I like being the dumbest guy in the room. Like, I've done a lot of stuff over the past few years, and, like, again, the jiu-jitsu stuff, and I started realizing I'm actually going to combine three things, the masculinity thing and the learning to do stuff. I realized there's a bunch of dudes that I really like that are doing jiu-jitsu, and I want a reason to hang out with them.
Yeah.
And it's
community.
I'm like, there's you, there's Jeff, who used to be my boss, and I'm just like, or my boss's boss. And
Hausnick, even though, like, apparently you guys never ran into each other very much, but no way you didn't know who, like.
Yeah, we knew who each other were, but we didn't hang out. And I'm just like, okay, here's some guys. They're smart guys. They're not just bros trying to do this stuff. And I think, I had a martial arts background from way back when, but I was like, this is a completely different game, and it's a game I don't know anything about. So I just want to get in, and that's kind of the way I approach this stuff. Is like, I don't know anything, so that's a good place for me to be, because my brain just starts going, all right, I need to learn this thing, and it just opens up new pathways.
Well, they're kind of the reason too. I tell these stories to everybody, but I was just like telling you we're working early. I'm like, I thought this for 8 years, and then I was shown this, and now I'm teaching this to white belts.
Right.
Because this was taught in a room of white belts.
Right.
And man, I tell people that to show them that, like, it never stops. Like this last 6 months ago, we had the guy I told you does privates with Hickson in his garage or his living room or wherever he's got set up at his house. And this guy came in, and I did a private lesson with him. And it was me and Cora and my best friend Colby and one other person, Michael Lasser, the guy that teaches the morning program, the guy that loves Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And he showed a move it's probably the second sweep I ever learned. That thing I showed you today, that was called the sit-up sweep. Well, that was the first one I ever learned. The second one, the flower sweep. So this is a white belt move.
Right.
And so like Colby's a white belt, Michael's a blue belt, Cora's a brown belt, I'm a black belt. So there's a spread of ranks. Just everybody but a purple belt there. Jack's a 2nd degree black belt or 3rd degree black belt.
Right.
And he shows this version of the flower sweep that I've never even considered. And it's like one of the first moves I ever learned. And this like almost 13 years into the game for me.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sitting over there, and it's effectively blowing my mind. Then he showed a sweep that I'd never even seen before from closed guard. I'm like, and it's the stupidest, simplest move ever.
Don't you love that, though?
And I'm like...
But, once that bridge happens, like, then you start making all these other connections.
Exactly. So, it's literally like I started experiencing, like you feel your consciousness in relation to jiu-jitsu start to grow. But then in the seminar, so we did the private, then we did the seminar. So, like, those students see me just, like, over to the side, like, like...
Right.
Just making all these faces, like he's showing stuff, and it's, like, effectively blowing my mind on the spot.
Right.
the seminar starts. Jeff Wood's in there. He's a brown belt, be a black belt soon. Been training with me for like 10 years at least. And he's going, and I look over at him, and I'm like, I mean, my mind's still being blown by this guy, but I'm just like, I'm looking at him, and he's just like, and like honestly, like after that seminar, because we had another seminar with the Eddie Bravo guy. Yeah. Everybody, was a bunch of black belts in the room. We're all doing the same thing. We're just like, this guy. Oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, Renaissance people sculpted this.
Yeah.
Like this is what learning looks like.
Right.
Like this is when like you because we thought we knew.
Right.
And we only made those faces because we realized that we did not.
Don't you like that sort of Renaissance man approach to this stuff, though? I mean, because...
I do.
I mean, and this is where I like working around with the academics. It's like you've got people that are doing stuff that's mentally tough, and they're doing stuff that's physically tough, and they're constantly engaging strategy, their physical limitations, kind of in their, and then learning how to use that stuff, going back to that warfare mentality of how do I use this, this stuff strategically against my opponent?
How can I use psychology for my history?
Right. And then you start making these sort of, these connections to the other parts of your life. And like I said, I've had 2 sessions so far. Like, I'm as green as they get. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. I can see how this all plays together.
I can see why people get totally addicted to this.
I can see this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to the guy yesterday that was on the podcast. He's wanting to start doing some training here pretty soon. I've known this guy since I was like 8 years old, and just stayed in touch over the years. But people just don't know what to expect. They don't know what to expect. Nervous about it, but also they see like the intellectually stimulation of it. Of like, man, okay, these people doing it, or like Eddie Bravo refers to them as nerd assassins. Like it does draw a lot of times a weird intellectual crowd.
Yeah.
Like it's not, I don't know, people, over the years, I've had this a lot more, and I think that there's just enough people proliferating it that are considered, that are listened to, and circles that are going to be a different, like, because it used to be all street fighters
right.
and MMA wannabes, and I saw the movie Never Back Down, and I'm here to be
right.
that. We still deal with that sometimes, but we're to a point, too, where it's like, you don't belong here. You might mess things up for Billy and I.
Right.
Yeah. And, like, protecting the culture in that way, too. Like, I don't even feel bad about it. I'm like, you're telling me about your 28 street fights, and we met each other 2 minutes ago? Yeah. I got to go.
I don't have time for that. When you talk about your toxic masculinity,
yeah.
I don't have time for your testosterone-driven brain.
Like, Tim's here every day. I'm going to go work mids with him. Talk to the front desk lady. She's going to tell you to scram.
Yeah.
But man, it is weird because you think about the like we're talking about MS-13 being on some sort of a spectrum or peripheral. Like, think about that for like martial artists. Like how the lowest common denominator views how that exists. Because man, every town has a martial arts dojo.
Right.
Most towns have multiples.
Right.
You grow up seeing it your whole life. You grow up watching martial arts movies.
We've all seen Jackie Chan.
Dude, First Strike was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, plus Shanghai Noon.
Don't. I've got Shanghai Noon on DVD.
Shanghai Nights was really good, too. I mean, honestly, for a sequel, I watched the sequel more than the first one. I don't know why.
I was a big Jackie Chan fan way back in the day.
Yeah, this, like, the wooden dummy, like, that's he's an expert at that. Man, I've always wanted to learn that wooden dummy. Like, it's just pure happenstance that guy walked in, was like, oh, like, and dude, like how it all went down is like he came in and was like I knew that he was like master level in judo,
right?
And I'm at like a shodan in judo, like the 1st degree black belt. He's a 6th. Mike McMillan's a 4th. So he's like, it came in and he's like, I would like to do class tonight. How much does it cost? And I'm just like, I don't know. just do the class.
Right? Just come on. Let's just see.
I was just like, I just sidestepped the price question and was like, I'm glad you're here. And then I was, just bebopping around doing whatever at the gym because there's usually a little lull period before jiu-jitsu starts after boxing. And he was working that wooden dummy, and I saw that he was trained, and I was just like, I went over and I was like, what do you know about that?
He's like, everything.
Well, that's literally as soon as he knew I was interested, I guess he realized he wasn't going anywhere, come to the right place, whatever. That's when he started Mr. Miyagi-ing me because he was like, I noticed him doing certain things, but what I noticed him doing was clips of this kata.
Right.
And so, but I knew 13 different Wing Chun movements, and I knew some partner drills and stuff. And so I was just like, I started asking term questions. And it started at that. And then, so he realized what basics I knew. And we did a couple of things. He's like, this is like your judo here. This is like your judo there. This is like this. This is like that. So he starts using judo to kind of teach me this other stuff. Now he's doing that. He's like, this sword cut is this throw. I remember the first time he brought in the live blade katana and was doing the draws. I was just like, what have I gotten myself into? This guy is the real deal. He knows things. He's a never-ending bag of tricks. And he's like, by the way, you can't throw me. Did he grapple one of my brown belts the other night? And couldn't sweep him.
Just
72 years old. And I was just like,
wouldn't happen.
Yeah, we did. We just put the higher ranks out in the center because I had a bigger class, had a tournament coming up. And one of my guys had a tournament coming up. I'm just like, get the high ranks out here. You guys roll with all the white and blue belts. Go.
So with all this, going back to the kind of the YouTube question in the wooden dummy, how long have you had that wooden dummy?
5 years. Through all of my locations. So since 2013, probably.
And you've had YouTube the entire time. How much
it's all
more?
on YouTube, dude.
I know, but could you really learn it?
No, I tried. I tried, man. I did. I couldn't even watch that Ip Man kata and learn because there wasn't somebody like you said, like earlier, back on the break fall. You're like, why
am I doing that? I see what you're doing, but I don't understand what.
That's how I labor, man, and that's why it's I don't even like saying this because I don't know, it sounds weird, and people that say it are weird, but it is a blessing to me that guy came to my gym.
Absolutely.
I don't talk that way. I don't. But I can't describe what I'm getting from him any other way.
The world smiled on you the day that he walked in.
I'm very fortunate to be able to work with him. I'm trying to learn everything I can, but I haven't been getting to do any rolling,
right?
Because pretty much as soon as we're done doing technique, he does the whole technique portion of class, and then he's just like, Brian, we work the Joe staff. And I'm just like, hell yeah, we do. It's so we just go over, there's an open mat, and we work this, that, and everybody else rolls for 25 or 30 minutes.
Right.
I'm kind of missing out on that, but at the same time, there's no way I can't take advantage of this.
Right.
And I'm too, the longer we do this, the more I like Jeff Woods was like, hey, we're going to start doing this Friday class, the color belts.
Yeah.
You cool with that? And I'm like, yeah. Set it up, I don't care.
Right.
I want the gym to be more of that than it is currently,
You're decentralizing it.
Focus groups.
Yeah.
In a sense, I hate that at any point that it was totally reliant on me and Cora, and it still is, and it always kind of will be to an extent, but I'd rather it be more yes, but also I get to do things here. Why do you think I'd have this martial arts gym? Because I want to train martial arts.
Right.
That's why I can't not work with this guy.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's I've had to travel the country to learn what I know.
Right.
And it's now this dude's just right here, and I get to fly, and we're to a place where I can fly a couple of these black belts I mentioned to you today in from California and elsewhere. And I can travel to team events in Bentonville or wherever. And
right.
It's nice to just be a student, man. To be the dumbest guy, because I'm telling you, when there is no more feeling of unworthiness when that dude's wearing a white belt teaching me, and I've got my black belt on. I'm just like, I want to say it to. I want to tell him. I'm just like, and then like I kind of like I like trying to talk to him about the ironies I observe. I'm just like the other day I was like, dude, you're a doctor. You save people, but you're the most dangerous person I know. And he's like, no, I'll exercise. Just exercise.
Unless it needs to be something else.
Yeah, I know, but I'm like, but the dichotomy of you have the ability to kill people and you have the ability to save people, and you've chosen to save people.
Okay, let me ask you a philosophical question on that. Let's go back to the man question. How important do you think it is for a man to be dangerous? Like, this goes back to a Jordan Peterson question. If you've got...
I'm never going to get sexually attacked.
But it's the... What is it? If you, like... I think he uses the if you never have the opportunity to commit a crime, can you really be considered a moral person? Like, if you never have... Like, if you're on an island by yourself... We're in philosophy now.
Okay, yeah.
If you're on an island by yourself... There's no, because most morality is basically built around how our interaction with other people is, all right? Mm-hmm. You're on an island by yourself. Tom Hanks, Castaway. Can you be considered a moral person for not doing things that you don't have the opportunity to do?
You know what I'm immediately thinking on that is then it would come back down to like, what are you harming on that island that's not harming you?
Yep. Okay.
Because, man, I've honestly, for the first time ever in my life, started having problems ethically with consuming dairy and eating processed meat.
Fair enough.
Like, it's not like I want to know that you didn't, like, F with that cow and it lived a horrible, miserable, tortured life. You know, like, I mean, I'm sure you can empathize with some of that, like being around. And my grandpa owned a farm and had cows, and my uncles still do. But that's what, like, the older I've gotten and, like, my empathy and, like, man, owning that dog in there, the gigantic 95-pound one that jumped on you. Like, when, for example, my friend told me his dog died, and it made me cry. Because I thought about my dog dying.
Right.
So, like, I've seen and consumed enough stuff now where it's like, and I'm getting older and I'm more concerned about my health. And, like, honestly, last couple of years, I wasn't competing. I got this new job at the university. I was trying to, I got the job at the university right as I got the podcast off the ground. Yep. So I had to kind of like, and I taught over those. So I had to kind of sit back and like not get to do this like I wanted until I could balance the scales.
Yep.
But my empathy levels has gone up for animals. So much to the point that if I was on that island, I would say, well, am I killing these animals?
I'm guessing you're not a hunter.
I grew up hunting.
You grew up hunting?
I killed several deer.
Okay.
I killed a squirrel when I was 5 years old with a 22.
Okay.
I went rabbit hunting. And I stopped doing that as a teenager, mostly because I wanted to do other teenager shit, like play football and hang out with my friends and, you know, drink Smirnoffs or whatever it was we were getting into, you know. But that's like what it, I don't know, like that's what I would come back to is like, are you doing, like, could you just live on that island and eat bananas and coconuts and, I don't know, and then you could just take it to the thing. It's like, well, this is shelter, like the Buddhist extreme. It's like, this is a shelter that I'm constructing killing these worms.
But do you make the moral argument it's okay for one fish to eat another fish?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because when you're talking about just natural rhythms of life, one organism consuming another organism is just a natural routine of life. It's a natural rhythm.
Okay. So where does consciousness fit into that?
I don't know. This is the question. I mean, what was it? I do think there is, like, I hunt. I still hunt. I think I approach hunting a lot different than most people do.
I want to get, that's the thing, is I would want to get my meat from hunting, but I just, like, I don't really have time to go hunt. My dad does. Like, that's what I want to fix. Like, I've actually, over the last few weeks, not eaten nearly as much meat because, like, I'm just kind of coming to, I saw this recently, this clip of a documentary about the Fairlife chocolate milk, and I was drinking the shit out of that, man.
Yeah.
And like it's like we're raised on chocolate milk in public schools.
You know, I hardly drink any or consume any dairy. I eat some cheese. That's kind of it. Like I don't buy milk ever.
Yeah, we don't either.
Well, and it's just one of those
cheese for me.
It's just I don't like it.
I would get chocolate milk at the store, or
I was allergic to milk as a kid, and so it was just like never. Like,
maybe everybody is.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know, but I would, you know, so I just never got much milk growing up, and then it was just like, okay, it's just not. So it's not on my palate, so I don't really think about it. And so now it's like, you know, one of those other things. If I do try to consume a bunch of it, it'll make me sick just because I'm not used to consuming it. So I just don't.
Well, I mean, I guess it kind of comes into like, for me, a little bit like what feels pain.
Mm-hmm.
I know what pain feels like. It sucks.
Right.
Roland told me it'll make me stronger, though.
Right, it will.
Because he's just like, you need to hold your arms up like this many minutes a day. And he's like talking to me, and I'm like, oh, I can't keep doing it, Bill. Just while you're having this conversation with me, man. But like I think we get to talking like we're like, this animal doesn't feel pain, like this animal does. Like I've like just through having a dog,
Right.
have like so many things I was told about dogs when I was a kid, and like somebody shared an article the other day, and I'm not to this extreme, like, but I've become like aware of like SeaWorld and Marine Land, and like I don't agree with any of that going on anymore.
Right.
Like I'm just like we're harboring, keeping in captivity this mammal that has a prefrontal cortex 40% larger than our own.
Right.
And that's okay. The parking lot is bigger than the whale tank.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. That I'm just like somebody's saying that animal rights is going to be the new slavery, and that's an extreme version of what I'm talking about. But it's like it's now a misdemeanor or a felony rather for animal cruelty.
Right.
Or it's becoming one. I don't know where we are.
I don't.
With that.
You know, but
I've been hearing all about like it's now animal cruelty is now criminalized.
See,
big time.
So I grew up on a cattle ranch. So raising until we moved to Corpus.
Did you ever have to dehorn a cow, dude?
I've seen it done.
I had to, man.
Yeah, and do you have to cauterize it? So my brother was a
No, they made me hold the thing on its nose. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They made me put the thing on its nose and hold it like this.
Oh yeah, we didn't have to. We always use squeeze chutes, so you didn't have to do that.
It was in the squeeze chute.
Really? Oh, my brother. So my brother's a vet. He works for the USDA now. He's not a practice.
Does he look exactly like you? Have I seen pictures of him?
No, actually, we're like polar opposites on so many fronts. Like, he's got red hair and brown eyes. I've got.
Do you have another brother?
No, just one brother.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the older we get, we start looking more. I guess you could start seeing similarities. Growing up, like he was stocky and redheaded and brown eyes. I was skinny and blue eyes and brown hair, and it's like you could tell we were brothers if we were standing next to our parents because there's we got opposite traits. But he was he was a vet for years, and so he would come back and do all that stuff for our cows, but we didn't. We got rid of any cows that had horns, so we didn't really have to do that. But I saw it done a few times.
And you like see their brain, dude.
You're just not seeing their brain. You're just seeing blood and stuff. And so
I'm traumatized.
then you cauterize it. I mean, but we did stuff like there was all of that. I see. There's a book called. I'm jumping subjects a little bit because one of the things that worries me with especially with a lot of animal activism is when they take it too far. Same thing that goes on with environmentalism. I'm way more of a conservationist than an environmentalist. There's a book called Last Child in the Woods, named Robert Louv. It came out 10, 15 years ago. And one of the things that he was talking about then was it kind of goes back to my deal with dudes. Is like, kids that don't go out in the woods anymore. He said, but one of the things that happened was that a lot of when you have environmentalists that are like, just leave this stuff alone, stay away, they lose touch with what's actually going on there. The woods becomes the other. It's not like I grew up wandering around out in the mountains by myself with a 22, hunting squirrels and doing this kind of stuff. I had an intimate knowledge of what it was like to be bitten by seed ticks and, finding snakes and, crawling through creeks and so the natural world is just a very real part of my life. And so when you talk about conservation, and plus then living on the farm, you kind of see the real world life and death experience and birth and all the things in between. You distance yourself too far away from that, and then it just becomes an you're idolizing whatever it is.
It becomes what team you're on.
It becomes what team you're on, and what it ends up actually suffering is the natural world that you're trying to protect, because you're making arguments based on something that isn't actually true. It's what you want to be true. And so one of the problems with like environmentalism, like especially when you talk about some wilderness areas where it's kind of like they don't go in there. You see a lot what's happening in California. They're not doing actual normal good burn control, like control burning and things that we know are good, and then end up with like a wildfire that just decimates everything, because they're not taking care of it the way that they actually know they should be doing. The flip side of that is just you being the one coming in and decimating it, and it's like where I like conservation. It's that happy medium. It's like with hunting, like in Arkansas, wildlife was pretty much decimated by the 30s from, market hunting, where they just came in and just killed everything. They clear-cutted most of the forest. We had huge erosion issues. And then now there's probably more wildlife. There's probably more deer.
We have to have urban deer hunts.
Yeah, and so right now there's more deer in Arkansas than there probably ever has been.
My dad said when he was 18, so it should have been mid-70s.
Yeah.
That you couldn't find a deer to kill.
Yeah, that's
like in his part of the country. Like they're from like between Clarksville and Ozark on 64. There's a town called Hartman before Coal Hill. Coal Hill has an exit off 40.
Yep.
But that's where he grew up. And like my family owned like a 7-mile stretch on the Horsehead Creek. So that's like the woods I grew up stomping around in, killing deer in. And I killed several deer on my grandpa's farm, or like in the soybean fields near his farm.
Right.
But apparently, and everybody talked this way in the mid 70s, like
This is next to impossible.
you would rarely even see a deer.
Yeah.
And I gives a little backstory as to why.
And that stuff was happening, but it was the conservation and the hunter groups that said, you know what, because they wanted to be able to do that stuff. And so you see now there's like you're losing a lot of like public land, or there's a lot of logging companies or wood companies like Weyerhaeuser, or I don't know if it's Weyerhaeuser anymore. Anyway, they lease out this stuff to hunters, and hunters are creating habitat, which they're growing more animals than they're actually killing. And so there's that part that's going on. And so, but again, they have intimate knowledge of what's actually going on. Where I differ a little bit is like archery is really big right now, and I've got a bow. I just don't trust myself enough to do it cleanly. Like if I want to kill something, it's one of these.
I've thought about that a lot.
Like I'm not necessarily hunting. I'm not hunting for trophy deer. I've never cared about trophy deer.
I would only hunt.
I hunt for
to
meat.
eat.
I hunt for meat, and I know I can do that quickly, and I guess as painlessly as possible with a gun. And so I don't. It's not important to me to make it more of a challenge. Like it's more sportsmanlike if you do it this way. I get that, but that's not why I'm there. Like I'm not. It's not for me. It's not this big mystical experience. I approach it from a very sort of respectful thing. I'm just not shooting everything. But I approach it that way just because I want to do it as cleanly as possible. And then once I'm done, then I'm done. Like I don't try to drag it out and do.
You clean your own. If you kill a deer, you're gonna clean it yourself.
I used to. I don't anymore. I actually take it to a butcher's for a couple of reasons. They just simply do a better job than I would.
I always hated cleaning. We killed too. Honestly, cleaning a trout and eating it fresh was the easiest thing. I got that down to a super fast. I think I could still do it, but
there was a period of time we grew cabbage. We had like 10 acres of cabbage when I was a kid. My dad was a produce broker, and so this is one of the hey, let's grow cabbage, and we got invaded with rabbits, and so my brother, who's older than me, Dad would drive through the field. My brother would ride on the front axle of the tractor with a shotgun, shooting rabbits.
Rabbits too, man.
We'd literally, fill up a 5-gallon bucket with rabbits on any given day. And
my dad was huge into rabbit hunting.
I got so good at skinning rabbits back then.
I always had to hold the legs while he would skin the rabbit, dude. And when he would get the rabbit, I would be like, "Ugh."
So I figured out you could just pull it off like a T-shirt. It's just right behind there.
Yep.
Somewhere out there, one of your listeners just cringed a little.
I know somebody. Yeah, exactly. So we're doing audio only on this, but it's crazy how like if I survey all of my platforms, like I have this hosted through Podbean, but
Yeah.
like the iTunes listens and the audio only listens, like
Yep.
YouTube has changed immensely. And I think that I'll eventually get this channel and like the gym channel. I've been balancing both of them. Like we have about 500 videos on the gym YouTube.
Yeah.
And I've got somebody filming. We're probably going to add that guy we were talking about earlier once we get into the new spot. But just balancing it out and like, okay, I'm going to YouTube.
Right.
What's that look like? Let's start doing it and figure out how I want to do it different. Who can I get involved? So that's like I'm starting to, like you think about this, like even with Joe Rogan's podcast, it's still like it's really Jamie's podcast.
Right.
Like without that dude, like, I mean, yeah, but without Joe also.
Yeah, I was kind of looking for a Jamie when I came in. I was like, hey, who's going to look up whatever YouTube video?
You know, which I can cast anything onto the TV there, but what I want to get figured out how to do is I thought about swapping my record player and the camera on that end and being able to Skype people in on that TV.
Ah, that'd be cool.
And have them filmed.
Right.
Being Skyped in. I saw a podcast doing that the other day, and I was like, okay. They had a table set up like that.
And I've been well, I was telling you before we started, I've been really considering starting my own podcast. I did the whole cabin people thing for a while, and it got really popular for a while. My problem out there is, one, it's an hour for anybody to get there. So if they're going to come out to the cabin for whatever, I'm gonna have to require people to have to drive. So I'm not sure they're going to want to do that. The other is the whole digital divide thing. You know, is it's a pain for me to have to upload stuff. I can do it, but then I run out.
It is here, man.
I run out of data. You know, before
I don't deal
5
with
days
running
in a
out
row.
of data. I just deal with super slow upload speed. Like it's about twice as fast at the university for
Yeah.
me because of the fiber optic they have. But here, I just end up typically doing it overnight, or
Yeah.
like I've several times, like on the audio, it's no problem.
Right.
So that's why it's like I always do an audio feed, and that's where I get my iTunes, and it pushes it out to Stitcher and all these places. But on the video, it's just like, okay, it's going to take me 7 hours.
Yeah.
Because what I do is like, so I started saving a copy
Yeah.
because it's a little faster to save a copy versus upload straight to YouTube.
Yeah.
All right. When you could YouTube live, I didn't do this, but you could just live into YouTube,
Right.
and it would be there, and you
Right.
didn't have to upload it.
Right.
So honestly, the answer is to build a computer for what I want, but
Right.
I'm probably not gonna. I don't know. I really just want to get another newer Mac and get Logic and just do it through the Mac for the audio feed and get a. I don't know. I'm back and forth because if I build a custom tower, I can run multiple camera angles off of it, and I can run the switching software and everything from that.
Can you not do that with just a good Mac Pro?
On switching angles on multiple cameras, I don't think you can.
What software would you use for that?
So it depends on if you want to use a software or if you want to use an actual hardware.
Okay.
A lot of it's hardware.
Right.
So, like, if you go the hardware route, it's probably a better idea to build the custom computer. Like Aaron MacArthur and I have talked a lot about it. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He builds computers and stuff. But software side, open broadcast software is one I've used a little bit. But I haven't really found one that I'm like, yes, this satisfies all the needs and it's easy to use. And
See, because I've got enough of a TV background that if I was, if we were swaps places and this was my podcast, I would just want to be able to either have a Jamie who's sitting there, switching back and forth between cameras.
yes.
Or rather than
Voice activation is one way that I see some of them do, but honestly, it's like it switches too because
it's too much.
Yeah. It would have done it like 6 times right there for us.
Yeah, and so just because that's what before I did anything, that's where I was in broadcast, and I would want to be able to just but not. I don't want to have to do it myself because then you break away from the conversation. Because if I'm always doing this, then I'm not giving you.
Exactly.
My
Like
full
sometimes I
attention.
just like I like watching Joe Rogan clips.
Mm-hmm.
There's no introduction of the guest or anything.
Right.
So some like yesterday's podcast, I haven't uploaded it yet, but it's just we started talking and Like there's clearly a point where I'm going to edit it in where, because like with the beginning, we're just talking and I didn't even introduce the guest or anything. I'm like, dude, you're reading the video. Like
Right.
it says his name in the video.
Right.
But it's just like, you know, and I kind of, like you ever, when you were a kid, this is going to sound weird, but like when you were a kid, you had like a walkie talkie and you could like listen on phone calls. It's like, I kind of feel like that, like when I listen to a podcast, like that's how I kind of feel, you know. So like I assume that some people are like, oh, or like you ever see that movie Frequency, but like longer range, like ham radios, like they played on that in Stranger Things this season. But there's like a whole culture of people out there that are this. Oh man, I want to listen to what these people have to say. I don't know them, but it would be interesting to be in the room.
Only mildly related. When I was fresh out of college, I was looking for a wireless microphone for my camera, my video camera. Went to Radio Shack, picked up. I was like, okay. And then somebody hired me to do their wedding, and so I put the lapel mic on the groom, and I'm sitting there on my camera with my headphones on, and everything starts, and then suddenly I hear truck drivers. Why am I hearing truck drivers? It's such a cheap radio or a microphone setup I got that it was just picking up everything. Like if there was some sort of radio signal, it was picking up everything. And I'm just like, I can't do this.
Is it a real thing for people to pick up a radio signal in their tooth?
I don't think so.
Did you ever remember hearing that when you were younger?
I think so. It might have been once upon a time, but I don't really.
You ever see that show Pete and Pete?
No.
Came on Nickelodeon when I was a kid.
I'll see. Yeah.
Two brothers named Pete.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
But their mom picked up a radio station in like their tooth.
I'm gonna throw that under the urban legend.
I've never looked it up, but I've thought about it several times, and I've got like a filling now. I got my first
So you're just waiting to pick up NPR.
Yeah, I feel like this filling might be cheap enough, like your lapel mic, that I'm gonna get a radio wave any moment.
You're just sitting here and you're thinking, why am I hearing Terry Gross? I don't know.
Is this an inner voice? Am I going crazy?
No,
imagine that.
What's going on?
If it was a real thing.
Terry Gross is my inner conscience, and I didn't know it.
Like I keep hearing voices, Doc. It's just the feeling in your head.
Feeling, man.
Don't look too deeply. Oh, this is very common for people to have radio stations in their mouth.
It's going to cost you a little bit, but I can put a tuner in so you can change stations.
Oh, man. Yes. We have an app.
Right.
Like my dad, he has these hearing aids now.
He can control it with an app.
And he controls it, and he's always just like, hold on. Okay, here we go.
My mother-in-law, I think hers... It's like she can tune it into like her TV somehow. So if she's watching Lifetime,
he does too.
Like they do, and I'm like,
that's great.
I mean, it's perfect, but I'm like, okay.
My mom loves it because my dad, because of his hearing, would just crank that. Like I'll call periodically, like, what's Dad doing? Oh, I hear he's watching Andy Griffith.
Right. That's what my in-laws, my father-in-law will sit in his little TV room, and he watches westerns 24/7 when he's in there. It's all but my mother-in-law watches like the Hallmark Channel. And so they have competing TVs.
They're stereotypical.
It really is. So yeah, we'll go over there and I'll sit with him and we'll watch John Wayne, and then they'll be in there crying on the Hallmark channels.
You know, I got my Arkansas history class working doing a project over True Grit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I gave them. So there's several versions of the audiobook on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I shared the audiobook. I'm like, hey, you need to listen to this.
Yep.
You need to talk about how this is either like what's in this textbook during that unit worth of chapters of Path to Statehood. I was like, or you need to compare it and be critical about the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So like you could take all three routes. You can compare it to one movie. You can compare it to both movies. You can compare it to the book in one movie. Just the book. This is a critical now. It's like 2-page paper.
Yep.
But I'm doing that also on John Grisham's A Painted House. So I got them a link to the movie.
Right.
Like, hey, this guy grew up in Arkansas. He wrote this book. This movie's pretty on with the book. I've read and watched both. Here you go. Same thing as the True Grit novel.
Yep.
But you said John Wayne.
I like Charles, and the fact that Charles Portis is still kind of, he's running around still, but he's not, like, he won't do anything related. Like, he wants zero publicity. He won't give interviews hardly anymore.
You ever seen Lonesome Dove?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of my favorites,
I love
man.
it.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched it.
I rewatched it somewhat. Dude, I'll
Really?
tell you, like, straight up. Okay, so, like, I grew up watching that with my grandpa all the time.
Yeah.
And I actually saw my grandpa's daughter today. So, like, she's like, my grandpa wasn't my real grandpa. So she's not technically my aunt. Like, but he was. Like, he married my grandma before I was born.
Right.
So, like, he's the only grandpa I ever knew.
Right.
So, grew up with him, but I forgot what I was going to say about him.
True Grit.
Lonesome Dove.
Lonesome Dove.
We watched that movie together maybe 100 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't watched it since, a couple years before he passed away, probably.
Right.
And it was just like I couldn't even think about it. And
Yeah.
I watched it last year.
Yeah.
And it was super nostalgic, man. I didn't want to watch it again because I just remembered. I was like, why did I stop watching this? It was like honestly remembering all the times we'd watched it.
Right,
It was a therapeutic thing, honestly.
So, okay, so what is it about that movie in particular that you like so much?
Man, Robert Duvall and Woodrow F. Call. With Tommy Lee Jones.
Right.
Gustus McCrae. Like those two characters in general. Like I was talking about this because I have a piece of rebar in the gym that one of my students brought me because they know I like non-conforming objects to hit you with. But I was like, I shook it at somebody. I was like, I hate rudeness in a man. And you remember that part where like Woodrow just whips the shit out of that officer for hitting Newt with his horse and stuff, with his horsewhip. But just like, or like when they go into the bar. And it's the bar that they like there's a picture of them up there when they were Texas Ranger. And the bartender gives them all that sass.
Yeah.
And he's just like, boom, smashes. Like, just their characters and how they deal with, like, bullshit.
Right.
Or, like, man, when they have to hang Robert Urich's character.
Yep.
Like, and how they show that affected the group. And, like, man, the snake crossing when that guy dies.
That was tough.
Like, man, all of these scenes are just, like, how they deal with it. Like when like what Robert Duvall says when the guy dies from the snake bites.
Right.
It's like we just got to ride away from it.
But then you get to the end when he's delivering the body. And then he's got to deal with it. He doesn't get to ride away from it.
I know, man. And the rippling effect of that death.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even watch part 4 when I was a kid because that was the part Gus died in, dude. I couldn't deal with that part as a child.
Yeah. I was
like him having one leg, like him being imperfect and a corpse.
Yeah. Couldn't
deal
do
with it.
That's what I always had problems with the rattlesnake scene in True Grit. Like,
oh man, that one was rough. Well, and the guy dying.
Yeah.
In the original, does Matt Damon's character die in that?
No, he does. No, he doesn't die.
Yeah, that was one of the differences.
I don't think he dies in the book either. I think
he gets hit in the head with the rock.
Yeah, the Coen brothers book or movie is way closer to the actual novel.
I'm gonna have to watch the Coen brothers. I hadn't seen it in that. My dad and I went and saw it in theaters, but I saw it after theaters. But I need to watch it just because.
I am really upset that there is not a bar in Dardanelle that's named the Matty Ross or the Roosters or something.
They should play on that culture.
There should be. I mean, because my name's Matty Ross. I'm from Yale County near Dardanelle. Why would you not?
The audiobook is read by a woman, of course, and she does like Rooster's voice and like a gruff sound. But it's like you get the sense that it's the older Maddie reading the book.
Yeah, that's that was the thing. It was one of those I didn't pick up on the first time I went through it and watched the movie. You know, their voice cadence is so much different. Like they have just a strange way of talking in that book. Both movies, especially the second one, and the book's written like that way too. Mm-hmm. Like they don't use conjunctions. There's no it's. It is every time, and I never figured out why until it occurred to me. It's written by an older Matty Ross who would have never spoken any other way, and so it's written in her voice, and so all the characters are using the older Matty Ross dialect.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great catch.
So yeah, it's like every time I'd watch, it's like it's just different, and I don't understand why it's different. And then I thought, oh, it's Maddie. Maddie's the one. That's her voice through this whole
That's
thing.
excellent writing.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Man. That's a sick tattoo on your arm. Just noticed that.
I appreciate that. That is my.
What do they call those?
It's. I mean, it could be a sugar skull is one of
Sugar
it, but it's
skull.
Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos skull. It's Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Which is actually a pretty cool tradition once you actually kind of get a little deeper into find out what it is. I mean, we have Halloween, All Hallows Eve, but Day of the Dead is what comes next. And in the Mexican culture, that's actually a really cool.
I know. I wish, like, when I took Spanish in high school, that I was not an idiot
Mm-hmm.
child. And I would appreciate learning about the actual, because, like, I mean, that in Spanish 1, Miss Sosby, she did a good job. Miss Sosby, you're listening. She probably not, but
Right.
I'm friends on Facebook, so she might be. She did such a good job as, like, just for an entry-level Spanish 1 about, like, making activities that showed us the culture.
Right.
It wasn't just about teaching us words.
We weren't just conjugating nouns.
Yeah. Even though there was a fair amount of that.
Yeah.
I was just like, I can't even conjugate real nouns.
Right.
Like in English. And you expect me to do it here? You didn't say it was going to be this way. And then, like, I found out that I didn't have to have Spanish to graduate, and I'd been duped. I was not a good student.
That was one of those things that, because I don't speak Spanish. I mean, I can speak, I've got really ugly Spanish.
Do you
And
think we should try and learn another language?
I have started listening to, like, as far as podcasts, like Duolingo. It's something because I don't have TV.
Oh, wow.
So going back to that.
Do you stream shows?
I can't. I don't. Going back to my
Oh,
shitty internet.
yeah.
Like I don't have. I can't stream Netflix because I just don't have it. And so I've got a handful of movies that I watch. When I want to watch something. But mostly, so I can do like podcasts. And so I've just got a Bluetooth speaker in my cabin. And so when I want to listen to stuff, that's just kind of what I do.
That's great, man. So honestly, like I was saying earlier, like, I mean, I just throw Joe Rogan up on the TV.
Yeah.
Because I've got the smart TV or whatever. But it's like if I didn't have that, I'd just be listening to him on my phone or on a Bluetooth speaker.
And I've just kind of gotten used to not having that.
You have to download the stuff? And then?
The Duolingo?
Well, I mean, do you have to download the podcast to be able to listen to it on your
No,
Bluetooth speaker?
I can stream it off iTunes.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine.
okay.
I've got enough.
It's like when I'm flying and stuff, I'll download stuff.
I will do. I mean, depending, but yeah, when I'm at mostly, I just stream it. It's not that bad.
Yeah, streaming audio and video.
Two different things.
Significantly.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying about uploading this is actually because now that the Podbean, like they make the video out of the audio, so it's really
Right.
like I'm like, yeah, I haven't even left the studio yet. I don't know if I want to.
Right.
And I'm not gonna be able to take that. This will work. I bet this will work on my. I'm gonna try and see if I can't format it, but I bet this will work on my Tascam.
Try it.
A DR40, and it works off a one of these on here. I can't remember which one, but it's got the little bitty baby
Micro
card.
SD.
Yeah. So, yeah. You do you have a preference on like audio recorders or anything? Softwares, anything like that?
No, I mean most of my world deals around the Adobe Creative Cloud stuff.
I'm probably about to start paying for that.
Are you?
We can benefit from it massively. Like with what I'm wanting to do, like I have 1,000 hours of editing Premiere.
Yeah.
So it's honestly, I just need to figure out what my next jump's going to be on doing all this video and audio.
Right.
And like it's going to come with a permanent space outside of this. I'll probably scale down what I'm doing here a little bit, or I might just keep it the exact same and start doing something similar at the gym.
Video's time consuming though. That's the problem. Like it's so much quicker. Like audio's faster.
Do it on your phone, upload it from your phone. That's like I've got
Yeah.
about 20 videos I'm going to do that with this weekend, and we're filming again tomorrow, but the guy is coming in to do it. So that's another thing, like on my gym videos, getting a dynamic shot
Right.
versus stationary instructional.
Right.
And now like this guy's involved, we're going to start pulling in other sources of media, like small clips of fights, voiceovers. Like I've done some voiceovers, but I'm trying to migrate. Like I've spent a time, like my goal was to do a big base of instructional with a little bit of varied content, We have a whole bunch of stuff out there. Some of it's from class, some of it's not, some of it's. But now that foundation and base is there. We've gone all the way through our striking curriculum one time. I can fill in the gaps the next time we go through. But now it's like, okay, well, I got content there.
Yeah.
I can share it forever. It's there. Now I can start. I don't feel the need to create as much content.
Right.
So now I'm going to reduce the volume a little bit and start
Focus on quality.
really focus on a quality video that's not
Yeah.
stationary shot instructional.
Right.
Stationary shot instructional. It's
Right.
going to have. I mean, so we are doing our first like fuller length instructional, and then we're as a part of that. Like one of the things I'm going to do. There's that movie I was telling you about, the Americana.
Yep.
There's at least 3 footnotes to that in a fight.
Okay.
All right. So there's John Jones submitted a black belt, Vitor Belfort, with an Americana.
Mm-hmm.
John Jones is a white belt when he did that.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, and the black belt he submitted, Brazilian black belt world champion in jiu-jitsu and seasoned MMA fighter.
Was
he
he
almost broke John Jones' arm with an armbar before that. Same spot we were working from today, bottom and top guard.
Was he just having a bad day, or it just caught him completely off guard?
John Jones is just that good, man.
Wow.
Like
As a white belt, it was that.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, because he just trains for MMA. So then that's
okay.
the thing. It's like he doesn't train with the gi on and stuff like that. So
Gotcha.
like when he does now, he's a blue belt now.
Okay.
John Jones is a blue belt now. So, then there is John Jones, another John Jones fight. He fought this guy Lyoto Machida.
Mm-hmm.
So like he submitted him with the grip version of that lock on the floor. Is how he got Vitor. The other guy, he's going to put his arm under his arm, called an underhook.
Yep.
And he hit what we call a whizzer, an overhook, and broke Teixeira's collarbone. Glover Teixeira. So that's an example of a different style of the same lock, not using a grip, but just using pressure. And it does the same thing. Just like when you were grabbing my neck earlier and I was doing that, same sort of idea, but like going over your arm and it just. And what's the third instance of an Americana? I can't remember, but there's these 3 profile. I want to show. I'm going to show a clip of the fight. Then, like, we're going to show. We're going to have some voiceover and like just show a little bit of like me drilling it, but not necessarily teaching it, like instructional style, just more like going through the motions. But that's some more along lines like mixed media, more text on the. Man, I'll tell you what we need to do, and like why I want to go with the Adobe. Because I had Adobe on this, and I got it. I had to put more memory and stuff on it.
Yeah,
we upgraded and got one new Mac, but that's going to allow me to start doing thumbnails. Thumbnails increase engagement, stupidly enough.
Right.
Which is just more time.
Right.
Jamie, we need Jamie.
You just need. This is what you. Well, you see, this is when you start. What would you call it? People come and like seek out my students a lot because they just want like. A lot of times they just want like free video work. Like, hey, it's experience. But then you're like, well, I'll trade you.
Yeah, no, I mean that's kind of where we're at, man. I'm like we're on the cusp. Like once we get decided exactly, because I've been really working this. Like I was just like, my first batch of ideas as a person paid off really well. I got all these other ideas. If even one of them, like this podcast, for example, takes off, like the gym took off, or like my history idea took off, or anything else, I think we'll be fine. But like I'm wanting to I want to package all of this together.
Yeah.
Right, like just to basically have the camera rolling all the time, and it's like
This is kind of one of those things. Like, it's really kind of the next step in the media world is when everybody becomes their own media company.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, this is kind of that's what I tell my kids. It's like, you know, I get them started with a WordPress site and a YouTube channel. I'm like, you're officially your own media company. Like you've got more power at your fingertips right now than any major network had 15 years ago. Like you can do everything. It's just, what are you going to put into it?
and in the last 15 years, how far it's come. I felt like I made a leap in terms of my understanding of digital media in the last couple of years. And I was talking to somebody about that, and they're like, well, it's only been around for like, Facebook came out when
2005.
Yeah, I know. I was a senior in high school, And I was just like, that's a great point, man.
2000. I mean, had smartphones for like 12 12
yeah.
years. 12 years. I mean, try to make,
Right around the same time.
Yeah. So it's just, and it's just going to get faster. And it's just going to keep changing. That's where you just kind of 5G's around the corner. That's going to be a game changer for a lot of stuff, and it's just going to keep going. The new thing, like I went to an Adobe conference a couple of years ago in Vegas.
I think my friend Nick went to that.
Adobe Max.
I'm almost positive he did Sign Hub.
And they were showing us like prototype versions of a Photoshop that have AI working in the background. And it was just mind blowing what they were able to do. Again, it kind of goes back to that conversation of does it create laziness? But it was like you'd start flipping like Photoshop. Say you're going to do a movie poster, and you got like 7 or 8 different portraits you want to use, or let's say 7 or 8 different characters, and you start like trying to build this thing. It was going, oh, you're trying to do this. Like you start doing the techniques to like blend in one of the characters within the back, like a movie poster with all the stuff around them. Like, oh, that's what you're trying to do, and it just does it, and like, bam, there's your thing.
Wow.
And then you're like, oh, okay. And then it was like, do you want to see it with your other images? So you've got all your other characters, and so you could just start flipping, and it would just start swapping out the photos just so you could do. And so it's the AI that figures out what your creative brain is trying to do and then does it for you.
Yeah.
And so that's, that was 2 years ago.
Do you have Creative Cloud?
Yeah.
You just pay for it every month?
Yeah, I just pay the monthly fee.
Man, I'm going to do that. And apparently, I probably get a discount because I'm an educator. So
Yeah.
Why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
Pay for Google Drive.
Yep.
It's a business expense.
It's one of those, I got it cheap, right? I've had it for several years now. I used to just buy. And then
That's what I had. And then when I upgraded this, I didn't have all my, and it was the one, it's like somebody had given it to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, there goes Photoshop.
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, no, you have to rent it now, which I really hated at first, but now it's like, okay.
I think that's where we're headed, man.
Oh, it definitely is.
I'm all like the unlimited storage on Google Drive, and like because I have a Google Suite set up for the business. It's great.
I don't use Google Drive. I use Dropbox for everything.
I did forever, and I switched because it integrated better with some stuff I was doing on the Google side.
Okay.
So, according to my web guy.
According to your web guy. Well,
which I think, like, that's one thing, like, we're about to wait to turn the key on is when we go to the new, like, my website's about 3 years old.
Yeah.
And we're going to totally revamp the site and bring in the podcast. And then also just, like, I want a place to, like, I've been working on it, like, McMillan and I, in the foundational stages of working on an ebook, like a jiu-jitsu ebook.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I want a place to start stocking my, like, intellectual property.
Right.
I don't have any intellectual property. I mean, I have a master's thesis, but I have lots of ideas.
Right.
I haven't written my first book yet. You've written a book. I got to get my shit together. You're writing a book.
I'm writing a book right now.
Have you written a book before?
Yeah, nothing's actually got published. I wrote one I wrote one on school shootings back in the like around 2000. Yeah, it was 2001.
You know, my birthday's April 20th.
Is it?
Same date as Columbine.
Yeah. Well,
and Adolf Hitler's birthday.
Hitler's birthday. Yeah. Yeah, I'd written
and marijuana.
I was actually I was a cop back then, and I was writing it on like it was media, because it was actually started as my master's thesis. I was talking, it was media violence and school shootings and the relationship.
What was Jonesboro before Columbine? Was it not?
Yeah, Jonesboro was in '98, and then but it was Paducah, Kentucky before then.
I remember hearing about that.
And
I don't know the specifics, but
Paducah, Kentucky was weird. Actually, and I found out recently. I've got a friend who's actually writing a book on mass shootings right now. He is a published author, so it will be available on Amazon before much longer. But my brother and sister-in-law, one of the kids killed in the Paducah, Kentucky thing, was supposed to be in their wedding.
Oh, man.
And so I didn't know that until this year. But it was on an editor's desk. It was just this close to getting published. And then 9/11 happened. And then nobody cared about school shootings anymore, like the entire... Because after Columbine, people were freaked out. It's very. I would
trench coat mafia, man.
I would say it's similar. It got the attention that it's getting now. But then it was such an anomaly.
Well, yeah. What you're talking about is an anomaly, like a pause.
Yeah.
Like we paused in caring about school shootings
Yeah.
until Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
Or
And then
whenever, would you say Sandy Hook
it's
was
like-
sort of the resurgence?
Yeah. Well, and it's
There was others.
the Gulf Wars all sort of fell in the back of our collective consciousness, and then Sandy Hook happened, and they're like, oh, let's pay attention to this again. And so, but anyway, yeah, it was about to get published, and then it got axed after that happened. But but yeah, now, so I've just gone, all right, let's just start all over, do something new. So let's write about the border.
Man, honestly, I have a long-term goal to get my PhD.
Yeah.
And I'll probably harness a dissertation / book around that. That guy coming out of ASU, they have it's actually a doctorate of philosophy, but it's in cultural studies. And he did an 800-page dissertation about the drive-by truckers.
Really?
You know who funded the drive-by truckers and bought them their first tour van, right?
I do. Let me think. Widespread panic?
Widespread panic. Dude, there's this funny meme. It was like, I think I pushed it on the podcast page, but it was like Bugs Bunny going, no. But it's like, can we listen to something besides widespread panic?
The funny thing is because they have not been in the front of my mind, but I kept watching like you and Cora like on social media, just like go and see widespread panic. And I remember my first time seeing it
25 times.
I just remember like the first time I noticed. I remember thinking, are they still a band? Like,
their guitar player died in 2002, and that's why everybody thinks they're not still a band.
I was just like, oh, they're just that was just something from way back when, and
Yeah,
okay.
they hit a real pinnacle in the late 90s and early 2000s. Then the guy that was like really a pillar of it all died of pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And then they replaced, we talked about this yesterday, Jimmy Herring's the guy that replaced him. But here's who Jimmy Herring played for and knows the catalog for. Before John Mayer joined Bob Weir and Dead and Company, he went on tour with Bob Weir, played all the Dead tunes. Played for Dickie Betts got kicked out of the Allman Brothers. Jimmy Herring played a tour for the Allman Brothers.
Okay.
Right? So there's another guy named Colonel Bruce Hampton. Colonel Bruce Hampton was in the movie Sling Blade. Right? The older guy with the mustache. Also a guy in a wheelchair, Vic Chestnut, also in Sling Blade. That's because Widespread Panic knows Billy Bob Thornton. In that record cabinet over there, you'll see their second album, Every Day, which has Angelina Jolie on the cover.
I was about to say, does Billy Bob Thornton play any of their music?
He directs some of their music videos.
Okay, because I was going to say, because he got into...
Yeah, it's all connected.
Okay.
But in Drive-By Truckers, it's all connected too. I thought about doing a dissertation that like a chapter on each, because one thing that's all this shares is these are non-stereotypical Southern rock bands.
Right.
They're not a part of any narrative which we would be upset by.
Right.
Except maybe a lot of their fans do drugs.
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
Drink lots of alcohol.
I'm sure.
They set like, we haven't been able to figure this out. Like the Ryman, we just saw them at the Ryman.
Yeah.
2 weekends ago. That's a coin from the event. They can come out with cool shit like that. But they set the record for liquor sales at that venue for the history of the venue. And and they've done that at a couple of venues.
That's saying a lot for Nashville.
Now, see, Ryman is an old venue.
Yeah.
But so we saw them in D.C., and there's a new MGM. And so it made sense. We're like, okay, well, it's a newer venue. It's only been built for like 3 years. So, of course, they set the record.
Right.
But then it's like, you set the record at another concert I went to in the same year.
Ryman's the first church of country music. But
it really is.
I mean, whenever I was in Nashville, because back when I was playing more music, I used to have to go to Nashville a lot for my job. I would just always walk by the Ryman and just lay hands on it. Just maybe
it was awesome
maybe
going
it'll
to a
help.
show there.
So that's the one thing I've never made a show at the Ryman. So,
well, then they had this guy Billy Strings sit in with them. This 24-year-old bluegrass player.
Yeah,
they killed it. Like after it was like 3 nights, and they just did stuff they'd never done. Tons of first-time songs played. Songs we didn't think they'd play, they played them. Songs we wanted them to play, they played them too.
Yeah.
And then they had this other guy, Todd Snyder, set in with them on night 3, did 3 songs, sang 2 of them by himself. Then they did this song they've only played 4 times, or 3 times, the third time played, since that guitar player I mentioned died. So it was like this historic show, but then afterwards, everybody's like super losing it. It's like they just did their last encore, and their singer's like, Edie Jackson, She's the sign language interpreter. Like she comes and she signs all day, and I just love watching her, man. She kind of makes me like tear up sometimes watching her.
Yep.
But he's like, Eddie Jackson, ladies and gentlemen, Todd Snyder tonight, Billy Strings last night. I'll see you later. Just like that's it. It's just like he summarized the whole weekend in like 2 sentences. Like Eddie Jackson, Todd Snyder tonight, Billy Strings last night.
I'm tired. I'm going home.
Yeah, but it is funny too because their singer, like, he never changes his guitar.
Right.
He has like he has a black guitar and this like wine red looking guitar, and they swap them out every so often. I haven't figured out why, other than they look like the same exact guitar. Both Tim Holly bought a Washburn.
This one's out of tune.
Yeah, and but like on this the acoustic run they did, they swapped out this dude's instrument probably 40 times. Like, I'm going to try to play the 12 string on this one. Yeah. He played a banjitar. Have you ever heard of that? I want one now. But he played a banjitar on like one of their most iconic songs. And he's like, oh, bring me that 12 string back. I'm going to play this 6 string. Now I'm playing a mandolin.
Yep.
Oh, back to the 12 string, back to the mandolin. It was funny. Like, all the fans were cute. It's like, dude, you don't change your guitar the whole year one time.
Right.
And then like the bass player made a joke. They're like, hold on, guys, we got to bring another guitar out here for Jake.
He's making up for lost time.
Oh, man. But, all these guys are in their 50s and 60s.
Right.
And they blow me away. Just being around music for as long as I have and being loving music, I don't understand how these guys do it.
Yeah.
Like, and I watched Jimmy Herring play. We rode the rail on one of the shows, and I've rode the rail before, and I picked up things watching him play. But still, every time I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, well, I picked a few things away. And then you sit back and you look at the whole band, and you're like, that's what I don't understand. How all 6 of you guys are making this happen right now.
That's how many years they've been playing together. That's how they would do it.
They are in their finest years. And Jimmy Herring's been with the band almost as long as the original guitar player that died, but he was a founding member, best friend of the front man. Like, it's a rough thing for the history of the band. I wasn't even around for all of that, and I'm just like, oh, man. Because it's just like it's a lurking sort of absence.
Right.
Like, yeah, they've got one of the best guitar players in the whole wide world backing him now, and he's arguably even better than that guy ever was.
But he's not that guy.
He plays all that guy's songs, though.
Yeah.
And, like, sometimes he'll be playing one of those iconic Hauser songs, and you're just like, that's sad. It's sad that the only way I get to experience this is through you playing this art that this other guy created. That's the only way I'll ever get it.
You get it through a surrogate. Yeah.
But what's crazy is I was thinking this, like, Jimmy Herring makes these wild faces when he plays. He's like this old man. But I'm like, dude, you know all the Grateful Dead songs. You know all the Widespread Panic has a catalog, 600 songs. He obviously doesn't know all of them. That's counting covers. He knows all the Allman Brothers songs. If you just took just those 3 bands, plus all of Bruce Hampton's stuff. Thousands. Bruce Hampton's his mentor. Bruce Hampton's, he sets a picture on his amp. Bruce Hampton died playing live at his birthday in the Fox Theater in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Like, on stage, 70th birthday, playing with Panic, Trey Anastasio, Tedeschi Trucks, passes away. Goes out jamming with everybody. John Popper was given the sickest guitar or harmonica solo, the guy from Blues Traveler.
Yeah.
And that's what killed him.
That's a good way to go, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go to a harmonica solo,
yeah,
I'd want it to be that guy's.
No doubt.
But, yeah, he just kind of passed out, and they thought that he was joking around.
Yeah.
And he had a heart attack and died. This was like 2017, but... Like that, so he knew that was Jimmy Herring's first band. That's like the mentor of Panic and all these other bands too.
Right.
See, like Panic's drummer's brother is Derek Trucks, who played slide guitar for the Allman Brothers.
Okay.
Panic's drummer, it's not the original drummer, but Panic's drummer, Dwayne Trucks' uncle, was the drummer of the Allman Brothers, Butch Trucks, who killed himself in 2017. See, that's why I got to write a dissertation on this.
I was about to say, you're a wealth of knowledge on this stuff.
What's crazy is I'm just telling you about Panic. That's
right.
what got us, like, we started talking about this, how this intersects with all these other bands and Sling Blade and Vic Chestnut in his wheelchair. And Todd Snyder and all these other people that have died, like Bruce Hampton, Michael Hauser. The people aren't even here anymore, and the legacies they left. And it's like honestly like Panic and Government Mule, and just very few people are just still carrying the banner.
Have I ever told you my theory on how we got rock and roll?
No.
Probably not. So you ever notice like all the good music comes from the South?
It's true.
Like,
well, I mean, do you think it's the blues? That's what one of my friends always says.
yeah, I mean,
It's the blues.
all the good music comes out of the South. Like right where we are, right here. 8-hour drive in a circle. How many home ports of music are you going to hit? You're going to hit Nashville. You're going to hit
Atlanta.
Memphis, you're going to hit Atlanta.
Athens.
You're going to get Muscle Shoals.
Yeah. Oh, you ever seen that documentary?
Yeah.
Great.
I have the soundtrack.
Okay, so Patterson Hood from the Truckers' dad was the session bass player in that band, the Swampers.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's what got me interested in all of this, is hearing somebody, Michael Booty, my friend, told me that. And I started making these connections.
But you get that, you go to New Orleans. You
Yeah.
get that. You got the Texas music, Austin. You get all of that. Make a circle. It's all here in the South. I mean, once you start going west, you lose it. And you start going north, you lose it. All right? But as long as you're like south and east, you've got it. And it's like nothing good ever came out of Nebraska as far as music's concerned. Nobody, and this is one of the things you start thinking about the immigrant culture who came here. And you've got, the African culture present. And you had like that Irish culture present. Those are both musical cultures, two different completely things. So you get the Scots-Irish stuff, which you get your mountain music, which turns into bluegrass, right? You get the African presence, which turns the gospel stuff, which turns into.
Oh, that's a great.
And so you get the Irish music culture with the African music culture. Those two combined.
You get the Arkansas Traveler.
You get the Arkansas Traveler, and you get Muscle Shoals. It's the natural evolution of all of those two cultures coming together. You end up with Southern music, which is arguably.
Well, you just completed my dissertation.
Good, I'm glad because I'm just.
I actually will probably run with that because that's fascinating. Like I have this big unit where I'm going into. So you just start talking about the stereotypes of Arkansas being backward and violent. Like I bring in like some of the mountain music, Arkansas Traveler,
right?
And like we got some different versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
but yeah, you start mixing those cultures. I mean, and this is the area where they would have mixed. It would all have been in the South.
Yeah,
because the Irish were white, but they certainly weren't at the top of the pecking order. And so these would have been cultures that would have been constantly
marginalized groups.
Marginalized group making music together.
Maybe that's why all of these bands are non-stereotypical. Like when I say non-stereotypical, I just mean non-racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was the thing about Muscle Shoals. Back in their heyday with the Swampers, they were session players are all different colors.
Yeah.
And that was the deal in the documentary. They were talking about they'd be playing together, but when they had to go to the restaurant, they had to they couldn't all sit together.
Man. I shared a meme about that yesterday.
And I'm just like,
back in my day.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm going to go to the restroom real quick.
Go right
You want to
ahead.
wrap this up? You need to use the restroom?
Yeah, we can go ahead and wrap this up.
Let's go ahead and wrap it up, man.
All right.
I'll show you the guitars across the way.
How long have we been going?
3 hours, 5 minutes. That flew by. I feel like we should at least take a bathroom break if nothing else. So, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate the invitation.
Anytime, I'll harass you to come back on, I'm sure.
We just did a Joe Rogan podcast. How many times did we reference Joe Rogan during this?
It's at least 7. I mean, it's standard for this type of activity.
Okay, just making sure.
And Jamie got like 5, 6 mentions.
Sweet.
The backbone. All right, man. Well, we're signing off. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.